The billionaire took the maid to the gala and silenced every person who laughed at her. She was crying in a stairwell at 2 in the morning, holding a torn invitation in her fist, when the most dangerous man in the city walked in and saw her. Vincent Hale owned the building, the floor, and most of the skyline beyond the window. What he didn't own was the feeling that punched through his chest when Clara Hayes lifted her face and tried to pretend she was fine. Before this story ends, the people who laughed at her will wish they'd never learned her name. Stay with me until the very end. Hit that like button and drop the name of the city you're watching from in the comments so I can see how far this story has traveled tonight. The 47th floor of the Ardent Tower did not make noise. That was the first thing anyone noticed when they stepped out of the private elevator. Not the view, not the cold minimalist furniture, not the wall of glass that cut Manhattan into a grid of yellow pinpricks. It was the silence, the kind that costs money, the kind built by triple-pane windows, sealed HVAC, imported limestone floors thick enough to swallow footfalls before they became sound. Vincent Hale paid for that silence because silence, in his experience, was the only thing that didn't lie. It was 11:43 on a Tuesday night in March, and Vincent was standing at the kitchen island with his jacket off, his sleeves rolled to the elbow, and a crystal glass of bourbon he hadn't actually touched. He was 34 years old. He had been photographed 4 times that week, twice leaving a board meeting at Hale Maritime Holdings, once stepping out of a black Escalade on Park Avenue, and once, unfortunately, with a woman named Odette, whose last name he hadn't bothered to learn. He had closed a $70 million acquisition that afternoon. He had fired a man who had worked for his father. He had taken one phone call from his mother in Connecticut that he had let go to voicemail. And now, at 11:43, he was alone, and the silence was doing the thing it always did, making him aware of his own breathing, his own pulse, the fact that he was a body inside a building inside a city, and that none of it actually belonged to him any more than it belonged to the pigeons on the roof. He set the glass down. He didn't drink it. He never really did. The penthouse was technically a 3-bedroom, though Vincent used exactly one of the bedrooms and considered the other 2 storage for suits he would never wear again. There was a library with books he'd meant to read in law school. There was a gym with a Peloton he had used twice. There was a study with a mahogany desk where he signed things and a glass cabinet where his father's service pistol sat behind a lock Vincent had never opened. There was, off the kitchen, a narrow service hallway that led to a secondary entrance, a utility closet, and a small back stairwell the building's original architects had tucked in like an afterthought. Vincent had been living there for 4 years and had walked through that hallway maybe 11 times. He walked through it now because he'd heard something. It wasn't a sound exactly. Not at first. It was more of an interruption in the silence, a texture, a hitch. The kind of thing his ear had been trained to catch in boardrooms, when a man's voice cracked a half-second before he lied. Vincent stopped at the kitchen island, tilted his head, listened. There. Again. A breath. Drawn in too sharp, let out too slow. Someone was crying. In his apartment. Vincent frowned. He knew, the way any man who lived alone knew, the sounds his space could and couldn't make. Pipes. The subway 8 stories underground at 3 in the morning. The wind against the eastern windows when a storm was coming off the Atlantic. This was none of those things. This was a person, and the person was trying not to be heard, and that second part was somehow what bothered him most. He moved. Not fast. Vincent Hale did not move fast. He moved the way a man moves when he has never, in his entire adult life, been in a room he couldn't leave. Measured, weight on the balls of his feet. He pushed open the service door. The back stairwell was cold. The building kept it at a lower temperature than the living spaces, a cost-saving measure no one had bothered to change in 30 years. Fluorescent light, concrete steps painted gray, a metal railing. It smelled faintly of industrial cleaner and the ghost of someone's laundry. She was sitting on the 3rd step up, knees pulled to her chest, forehead pressed against the backs of her hands. Her shoulders were shaking, not theatrically, not the way women cried in movies. In small, exhausted spasms, like a person who had been holding it in for hours and had finally, badly, lost the argument with herself. Vincent recognized the black polo shirt and the dark slacks before he recognized the person inside them. The uniform was the building's housekeeping standard. He had seen it 100 times without ever actually looking at it. And then, Very slowly, he did look, and he realized he knew her. Sort of. In the peripheral way, he knew the doorman's name was Miguel, and the concierge on weekends was a Russian woman who did not like him. The maid. The young one. Monday, Wednesday, Friday. He had passed her in the foyer once with a folded stack of towels in her arms, and she had said, "Good morning, Mr. Hale," in a voice so quiet he had almost not registered that she had spoken. He had nodded. He thought at the time that he had nodded. He wasn't sure anymore. He tried to remember her name. He couldn't. Her badge was clipped to her hip pocket, turned the wrong way, and it was that, not the crying somehow, but the small crooked detail of the badge, that made something in his chest do an unfamiliar thing. He cleared his throat. She flinched like he'd struck her. Her head came up, her eyes found his, and for a second, Vincent saw something he wasn't prepared for. Not embarrassment, not fear, but a flash of undiluted, furious shame, the kind a person only feels when they've been caught being soft in a world that punishes softness. She scrambled to stand. Her knees hit the metal railing. She said, I'm sorry, Mr. Hale. I'm so sorry. I'll go. I'll sit down." He hadn't meant to say it like that. He'd meant to say it kindly. It came out the way he said things in the office, which was the way his father had taught him, which was as a sentence that was not, technically, a request. She sat back down. Hard. Her hand went to her mouth like she was trying to physically hold the next sound in. Vincent stayed where he was in the doorway. He was conscious, suddenly, that he was a large man in an expensive shirt standing over a young woman crying in a stairwell at midnight, and that there was no version of this picture that didn't look terrible from outside. He took a step back. He let the door rest open against his heel. "I'm sorry," he said. "That came out. I didn't mean—" He stopped, tried again. "Are you hurt?" She shook her head. "Are you sick?" She shook her head again. "Has someone in this building hurt you?" Her eyes came up at that. A quick, surprised look. She almost laughed. It wasn't a laugh exactly. It was the shape of one, with no sound inside it. "No," she said. "No, sir. No one in the building." All right. He didn't know what to do with his hands. He put them in his pockets, took them out again. Finally, he did the thing he had not done in anyone's presence in years, which was to sit. He lowered himself onto the top step of the landing, about 4 feet away from her, and rested his elbows on his knees. The concrete was cold through his trousers. He ignored it. For a long time, neither of them said anything. She got herself under control in degrees. A breath. A swallow. The heel of her palm dragged across her cheek, then the other cheek, then under her nose in a quick, ashamed swipe. She was, he saw now, not wearing makeup, or if she had been wearing any, she had cried it off. She had the kind of face he would have called unremarkable in a meeting, and sitting 4 feet from her at midnight in a concrete stairwell, could not stop looking at. Brown hair pulled back tight. A small scar at the corner of her mouth. Old, the kind kids get falling off bikes. Hands chapped red across the knuckles. She was 22, 23, maybe. He didn't actually know. "What's your name?" he asked. She looked at him like he had asked her something much worse. "Clara," she said. "Hayes, Clara Hayes. Clara." He tried it. It felt odd in his mouth, plain, honest. "I've seen you here for a while." 2 years, Mr. Hale, in May. 2 years. "Yes, sir." He sat with that. 2 years. He had shared a 2,300 square foot apartment with a human being for 2 years, 3 times a week, and had not, until this moment, been sure of her name. "Clara," he said again. "What happened?" "Nothing, sir." "Clara. Really, I'm so sorry. I should not be here. I know I'm not supposed to be in the residence after hours. I was just finishing the laundry and I should have gone home. Clara." Something in the way he said it, the third time, made her stop. She looked at him properly. Her eyes were a flat, tired brown, rimmed pink. There was a smear of something, dust, maybe lint, on the collar of her polo. She had been crying long enough that her eyelids were swollen. "You are not in trouble," he said. "All right, you're not in trouble. Tell me what happened." She opened her mouth, closed it. Her hand went up to her collarbone, fisted around something there. A chain, he realized, a thin gold chain with something small on it. He couldn't see what. She held on to it like a person in a rough sea holds onto a rope. "It's stupid," she said. "Okay." "It's really stupid, Mr. Hale. It's not even a real thing. It's nothing." "Okay." She shook her head, laughed that silent, broken-shaped laugh again. "You don't want to hear this." "I'm asking." "You don't." "Clara." He leaned forward a little, elbows still on his knees. "I have been standing in my kitchen for 45 minutes staring at a glass of whiskey I'm not going to drink because I couldn't think of a single thing worth doing tonight. I promise you, whatever it is, I want to hear it more than I want to go back in there." She stared at him. He realized distantly that that was probably the most honest sentence he had spoken out loud in a year. She wiped her face again, took a breath that shook on the way in and came out steadier than it went. "I'm graduating," she said, "in 3 weeks, from Westbrook. The business program. It's a 4-year. I did it in 5 because I was working. Anyway, it's not a big school, but it's my school. And my cohort, my study group, we've been together the whole time. And there's this gala, a graduation gala. Everyone goes. It's at the Landmark downtown, and the school rents the whole ballroom, and the alumni come. And it's a big deal. For us, it's a really big deal." He nodded. He didn't say anything. He had learned in business a long time ago that when a person finally started talking, you did not interrupt them. So last week, she pressed her lips together, pressed her eyes shut for a second, opened them. "Last week at the library, we were studying, and Madison, she's one of the girls, she was going around the table asking everyone who their date was, who they were bringing. And it's casual, ha, who are you bringing? But it wasn't, because Madison doesn't ask anything casually. Anyway, it got to me. And I said I wasn't sure yet, because I wasn't bringing anyone. And she laughed. In this way. And she said, Clara stopped, swallowed. She said, "Oh, Clara, come on. Who are you going to bring? One of the guys from the building you clean?" Vincent did not move. "And everyone laughed," Clara said. Her voice had gone very quiet. "Everyone. Even the ones I thought were my friends. And I laughed too, because what else do you..." And then Madison said, "No, seriously, it's fine. A lot of girls go stag. It's fine. It's just that, for the photos." And then she did this thing with her hand, like Clara made a small dismissive flick in the air. Like I was a stain she was wiping off the table. "Clara, I'm fine, Mr. Hale." "You're not." "I am. I'm just tired. I worked a double today. I had a paper due at midnight. Her voice cracked. She hated it. He could see her hate it. "I got the paper in at 11:58, and then I came down here to finish the laundry before I went home, because Mrs. Devlin on 42 leaves me a good tip if I turn the towels by the morning shift, and I thought if I could just finish this, I could sleep on the train. And I dropped the invitation." She uncurled her left hand. Vincent hadn't noticed until now that she was holding anything. A piece of thick cream cardstock, half crumpled, bent across the middle where her fist had been. Engraved lettering. A gold border. One corner was torn. It looked like it had been torn the way a person tears a thing when they are trying to talk themselves out of caring about it and failing. "I was going to throw it out," she said, "in the laundry chute. I had it right there, and I couldn't. I couldn't. And that made me so angry at myself. Her breath caught. "And then you came in." Vincent looked at the invitation, at her hand, at her face. And this was the part he would think about later, in the dark, in his bed, staring at the ceiling. He had been in rooms where men with guns had been unhappy with the decisions of his lawyers. He had been in a negotiation in Rotterdam where a Dutch shipping heir had put a loaded Glock on the table between them because he thought it would be funny. He had once, at 26, watched his father code on the floor of their apartment in Darien, and had been the one who called 911 and had not, in the 3 minutes and 41 seconds it took the ambulance to arrive, felt anything he would have called fear. This small, exhausted woman, this crumpled piece of paper, this little broken laugh she kept making. This was, in some quiet and humiliating way, harder. He said, "Who is Madison?" Clara looked up. "What?" "Her last name, Madison. Madison Calloway, but why?" He filed the name. He didn't answer her. He realized, already running it in his head. Calloway. Calloway. He knew a Calloway. A Richard Calloway, on the board at Westbrook Partners. No relation, probably, but close enough. Small world, small island, small. He stopped himself. That wasn't what she needed. "Clara, Mr. Hale, please don't do anything, okay? I should not have told you that. She's going to be my colleague when I graduate. If I graduate, I need to be able to walk into that room in 3 weeks, and you're going to walk into that room." She looked at him. "You're going to walk into that room," he said again, and he could hear, somewhere at the back of his own voice, his father's voice, the one he had been running from since he was 19. "And you are going to look at Madison Calloway, and you are going to smile, and you are going to not give her the satisfaction of knowing that she made you cry in a stairwell at midnight. Do you understand me? Mr. Hale, do you understand me?" "Yes, sir," she whispered. He let out a breath, sat back against the wall, ran a hand over his jaw. He hadn't shaved that morning. There was a rasp of stubble against his palm. They were quiet for a minute. The stairwell hummed faintly, the way old buildings did, some invisible current running through the bones of the place. "How old are you?" he asked. 23. "You put yourself through school?" "Mostly." "Where are you from?" "Upstate, a town called Kirkwood. You won't have heard of it." "Parents?" "My mom's in Syracuse. My dad's not around." She said it flatly, the way a person says a fact they've had a long time to stop flinching from. "Siblings?" "One brother, Army. He's in Germany right now. And you? And me? In the Ardent 3 days a week for 2 years." "Yes, sir." "And Mrs. Devlin on 42. And the Weissmans on 38, and Mr. Pratt on 51 when his regular girl is out." A ghost of a smile. "And you?" "And me." "Yes, sir." He nodded, slowly. The invitation was still in her hand. She had smoothed it out without seeming to notice she was doing it. Her thumb moved over the engraved lettering like she was reading it with her skin. "Clara." "Yes, sir." "Go home." Her face did a small thing, a disappointed thing. She hit it fast. "Yes, sir." "Finish the laundry tomorrow." I can finish it tonight. It's only—" "Clara, go home. I'll tell Mrs. Ortega in the morning. Nothing's coming out of your pay. You're on the clock until you walk out the lobby. Are we clear?" "Yes, sir." "Good." She stood, slowly. She was small, smaller than he'd realized when she was sitting. The crown of her head wouldn't have cleared his shoulder. She held the invitation down at her side like she was embarrassed of it now. She got to the door, her hand on the push bar. She stopped. "Mr. Hale?" "Clara." She didn't turn around. She spoke to the metal door. "Thank you for not laughing." And she pushed through, and she was gone. And the door hissed shut behind her with a soft pneumatic sigh, and Vincent Hale was alone on a cold concrete step in the stairwell of his own building at 12:09 on a Tuesday night in March. He sat there for another 20 minutes. He didn't remember later what he thought about. He remembered that when he finally went back upstairs, he poured the bourbon down the drain without drinking it, and he stood at the kitchen window looking out at the city, and he said, out loud, to no one, "Madison Calloway." And then he laughed once, short and not amused, because he had not, until that exact moment, realized he was angry. He did not sleep well. He was a bad sleeper under the best conditions. 4 hours was a good night, 5 was a gift. And this was not the best conditions. He lay in the dark in the enormous bed in the enormous room and stared at the ceiling and replayed, in a loop he couldn't stop, the sound of her voice saying, "One of the guys from the building you clean." He didn't know why it had landed. He had, he told himself, done worse. He had, 3 months ago, personally signed off on a reorganization that had cut 90 people from a logistics division in Pennsylvania. He had gotten a thank you card, last Christmas, from a woman whose brother he had declined to bail out of a bad investment because the bad investment was, in fact, bad. He had stopped reading the cards 2 years ago. He was not a kind man. He was a fair man most of the time, And he was a competent man, almost always, and he was, he suspected, a lonely man in a way he did not allow himself to examine very often. But kind? No. So why, he thought, staring at the ceiling, why this? Why her? He turned onto his side. Thank you for not laughing. He turned on to the other side. At 4:15 he got up. He made coffee. He stood at the window again. The sky over the East River was doing the thing it did before dawn, that bruised, tender gray. He watched it for a long time. By 5, he had a plan. By 5:30, he hated the plan. By 6, he was sitting at his desk in the study with his laptop open, and he was typing a name into the internal HR portal for Ardent Residential Services, and a small photo of Clara Hayes came up on his screen. In the photo, she was trying to smile for the camera and mostly failing. The photo was 2 years old. She looked younger. Her hair had been longer. Clara Hayes. Date of birth, June 9th, age 23. Address, a number on a street in Washington Heights. He did not know. Employment start date, May of 2 years ago. Status, active, part-time, hourly, no benefits. Education reimbursement, none applied for. Supervisor, Maria Ortega. Performance notes. Reliable, quiet, no complaints. No complaints. He closed the laptop. He sat with his hands flat on the desk for a long moment. Then he picked up his phone and he called Davy. Davy Park was Vincent's assistant, had been for 6 years, and was the only person in Vincent's professional life who did not, under any circumstance, pretend that Vincent was not occasionally an idiot. Davy answered on the third ring, which meant he was already awake, which meant he was already at the office, which meant it was a normal Wednesday. "You're up early," Davy said. "I need a favor. You have 3 meetings today and lunch with the Reinhardt people at 12:30. Push lunch to Thursday." A pause. "Okay. And I need you to do something for me that isn't work." "Oh no." "Davy, the last time you said that to me, I ended up on the phone with a dog breeder in Connecticut at midnight because a woman you were seeing had mentioned she liked golden retrievers. That was a different thing." "It was not a different thing. What do you need?" Vincent looked out the window. The sky was turning pink at its edges. "I need you to find out everything you can about a graduation gala at Westbrook University. 3 weeks from this Saturday, at the Landmark Hotel, business program, and I need you to find out if I can still buy a ticket." Silence on the line. "Boss, Davy, are you going to a college graduation gala?" "Possibly. For a business program at Westbrook." "Apparently. The Westbrook, that is, and I say this with love, a mid-tier regional school that our company does not recruit from." "That's the one." A longer silence. "Is this a woman thing?" "Davy, it's a woman thing." "Buy the ticket." "2 tickets?" Vincent paused. He thought about Clara's hand on the push bar. "Thank you for not laughing." "2 tickets," he said. "Yes, 2. Copy that." "And Davy?" "Yes." Quietly. "Always." He hung up. He sat for another minute with the phone in his hand. Then he opened his laptop again. He looked at the little photograph of Clara Hayes for what might have been 5 seconds or 2 minutes. He couldn't tell. And then he closed the laptop, and he went and took a very long, very cold shower, and he tried and failed to convince himself that what he was about to do was a normal thing that a normal person would do. Clara did not come in on Wednesday. Wednesday was her day, but Maria Ortega called up to Mrs. Devlin on 42 to explain that Miss Hayes was taking a personal day, and Mrs. Devlin, who was 81 and kind, said, "Oh, the poor dear, is she sick?" And Maria said, "Family matter, ma'am," which was a lie she had learned to tell without remorse because Maria Ortega had been a housekeeper for 36 years before she was a supervisor, and she knew that sometimes, for a young woman, a personal day meant she had cried too hard the night before to put makeup on a puffy face. On Thursday, Clara came back. She came up in the service elevator at 7:45 in the morning, and she walked down the 47th floor hallway with her cart of cleaning supplies and her stack of folded linens, and her head was up, and her uniform was pressed, and she had, under careful foundation, concealed the last of the redness around her eyes. She had told herself, on the train in, that she would behave normally, that she would knock on the service door and say good morning to whoever answered, and she would do her job and she would not, under any circumstance, allow herself to be sorry for herself. She knocked on the service door. It opened. Vincent Hale was standing in it. He was wearing a gray suit and a white shirt and no tie, and he had, very clearly, been waiting. Clara's hand, on the handle of her cart, tightened hard enough that her knuckles went white. "Mr. Hale," she said. "Clara. She tried to get her breath. "I can come back. If this is a bad time, I can come in." Mr. Hale smote. "Clara, come in." She came in. The kitchen was the way the kitchen always was. Pristine, impersonal, smelling faintly of the lemon cedar cleaner she herself used on the counters. There was a French press on the island with coffee in it. There were 2 cups. One was empty. One had been used. Clara's eyes found that second cup and stuck on it for a second before she made herself look away. Vincent closed the door behind her. He did not lock it. She registered that distantly as a kindness. "Clara," he said. "Sit down. Mr. Hale, I have 3 apartments today. Mrs. Ortega knows you're up here. You have as long as you need. Sit down." She sat on the edge of one of the tall leather stools at the island. Her spine did not touch the back. He poured her a cup of coffee without asking. He slid it across the marble. "I don't," she began. "It's decaf," he said. "I called down to Mrs. Ortega this morning. She said that's what you drink." Clara stared at the coffee. Her throat went tight. She said, very quietly, "Why did you call Mrs. Ortega?" Vincent did not sit. He stood on the opposite side of the island. He put his hands flat on the marble. He took a breath. He was not a man who took visible breaths. It was the first time Clara had ever seen him do anything that looked like hesitation. "Clara," he said, "I want to say something, and I want you to let me finish before you answer. Can you do that?" "Yes, sir. On Saturday, the 14th of next month, at 7 p.m., I'm going to pick you up from your apartment in Washington Heights in a car. I'm going to take you to the Landmark Hotel. I'm going to walk you into the Westbrook School of Business graduation gala, and I'm going to stand next to you the entire night." Clara's mouth opened. She didn't say anything. He kept going. "I have already purchased 2 tickets. I have already cleared my calendar. I have spoken to my tailor about a dress. I have not ordered anything. I would not do that without asking you, but I've made inquiries. I would like to pay for the dress. I would like to pay for your shoes and your hair and anything else a woman does for an event like this that I don't know about because I am a man, and I have never thought about it. I'm not finished." She closed her mouth. "I'm not offering this because I feel sorry for you." He said it carefully. He was looking at her as if she were a document he was about to sign and wanted to be very, very sure of. "I am offering this because on Tuesday night, in my own stairwell, a young woman I employ told me, among other things, that the people she had trusted with the last 5 years of her life had laughed at her for being who she is, and I have not stopped thinking about it since. And I am in a position, a specific, rare position, to change what happens in that room for her, and I have decided that I am going to." All about this chapeau. Silence. The coffee steamed between them. "You don't have to say yes," he said. "If you say no, nothing changes. You come in on Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and I am Mr. Hale, and you are Miss Hayes, and we never speak of this again. That is a real option. I want you to know that. I want you to know that before I say the rest of it." "The rest of it?" "Yes." "What's the rest of it?" He was quiet for a beat. "The rest of it," he said, "is that I would like to take you to that gala even if no one had laughed at you. I would like to take you to that gala because I have, for 2 years, walked past you in a hallway and not seen you, and on Tuesday I saw you, and I cannot unsee you, and I would like, at least once, to stand next to you in a room full of people and have them see you too." Clara's hands were shaking. She put them in her lap so he wouldn't see. She realized, holding her breath. She let it out. "Mr. Hale, Vincent, Mr. Hale." She said it firmly. She wasn't ready. Not for that. "Why are you doing this?" He looked at her. For a moment she thought he wasn't going to answer, and she thought strangely that she could respect that she would take a non-answer from him more easily than a pretty one. But he did answer. He said, Because on Tuesday night you said thank you for not laughing, and I went upstairs and I realized that in 34 years no one has ever thanked me for that before. And I think that might say something about me that I don't want to be true anymore. The kitchen was very quiet. Outside, 47 floors down, a garbage truck was doing its rounds on 2nd Avenue, the small diesel grind of it almost reaching the window. Clara looked at him. She looked at the coffee. She looked at her own hands in her lap. She thought of Madison Calloway's hand making that small dismissive flick in the air. She thought of her mother in Syracuse, who had worked 2 jobs until she was 59 and had never, not once in Clara's entire childhood, gone to a party in a nice dress. She thought of the invitation, half crumpled, in the drawer of her nightstand where she had put it at 1 in the morning because she had not, in the end, been able to throw it away. And she thought, and this part she would not tell him for a long time, she thought about the fact that when she had pushed through the stairwell door on Tuesday night, she had walked to the bus stop in the rain, and she had cried the whole way. But underneath the crying, underneath the shame and the exhaustion, there had been a small, warm thing she had not been able to name, which was that a man she had been invisible to for 2 years had, for 29 minutes on a cold concrete step, looked at her like she was the only person in the building. She picked up the coffee. Her hand was steadier now. She took a sip. It was good coffee. She set the cup down. She said, "Mr. Hale, I can't let you pay for a dress." He did not smile. He almost did. She saw the corner of his mouth do something and then decide against it. "All right," he said. I have savings. Some. I can get a dress." "All right. But. She looked up at him. Her eyes, he noticed, were very clear. "But," she said, "if you still want to take me to the gala, I would like that, yes." He did smile then. It was a small one. It was not a smile she had ever, in 2 years of passing him in the hallway, seen on his face. It did something to the set of his jaw and the line around his mouth that made him look, for just a second, not like the man whose name was on the lease, but like a man. A regular one. Tired. Surprised. Maybe a little afraid. "All right," he said. "Then Saturday, the 14th, 7 p.m. 7 p.m., she said. "I'll have the car sent." "Okay." "Clara." "Yes." "If you change your mind at any point between now and then, for any reason, you tell me. You don't owe me this. Do you understand?" "Yes, Mr. Hale." "Vincent?" She hesitated. "Vincent," she said. He nodded once. "Drink your coffee," he said. "Then go do Mrs. Devlin's apartment. She likes the towels folded in thirds, not halves." "I know, sir. Of course you do." He left the kitchen. She sat at the island with the coffee in her hands for another full minute before she could stand. When she did stand, she walked to her cart. She rolled it out into the hallway. She pressed the button for the service elevator. And in the polished steel of the elevator doors, she caught a glimpse of her own face, flushed, startled, alive in a way she had not seen it in months. And she realized she was smiling, a little, like a person who could not quite believe the day she was having, and she pressed her hand hard over her mouth and she did not let herself laugh out loud, because she was still, technically, on the clock, and Clara Hayes did not ever laugh on the clock. The elevator came. She got in. She rode down to 42. 47 floors above her, Vincent Hale stood at the window of his study, watching the river, with both hands in his pockets, and a feeling in his chest he did not recognize and could not, for all the control he had spent 34 years building, get rid of. He did not yet have a name for it. He would. The rest of that Thursday moved around Clara Hayes like water around a stone. She did Mrs. Devlin's apartment the way she always did, towels folded in thirds. The small crystal dish on the entry table wiped and set back at the exact angle Mrs. Devlin liked. The kitchen faucet polished with a soft cloth because the old woman could not abide water spots. Mrs. Devlin sat in her armchair by the window and watched the birds on her feeder, and asked Clara, without turning her head, if she was feeling any better, and Clara said, "Yes, ma'am, thank you." And Mrs. Devlin said, "Good. You're a nice girl, Clara. Don't let anybody tell you different." And Clara had to step into the laundry room for a moment and press her palms hard against her eyes before she could come out again. By 2 o'clock, she was on the uptown train with her tote bag on her lap and her earbuds in, though she was not actually listening to anything. She kept replaying the morning on a loop she could not turn off. The coffee. The marble island. The way he had said her name. Not Miss Hayes, not any of the vague generic things men like him said to women like her. Just Clara, the way her mother said it, and her brother, and the two people in the world who knew her. The way he had said Vincent. She did not let herself think about that one too long. It felt like something she could break by looking at it. At home, she climbed the 4 flights of stairs to the apartment she shared with a dental hygienist named Raina and a rotating cast of Raina's cousins from New Jersey. The apartment smelled like fabric softener and yesterday's chicken. Raina was on the couch in scrubs, eating dry cereal out of a mug. "You're home early," Raina said. "Short day? You cry in the shower again?" "No, girl. I didn't." Raina studied her. Raina had known Clara for 3 years. Raina did not miss things. Something happened. Nothing happened. Clara Marie Hayes. Raina. Nothing happened. Clara put her tote down on the kitchen table and opened the refrigerator and pretended to look for something. She did not know what. She closed the refrigerator. "I need to find a dress," she said, to the refrigerator door. "For what?" "For the gala." A pause. A very long one. When Clara turned around, Raina had put the mug down on the arm of the couch and was staring at her with an expression Clara could not read. "I thought you weren't going." "I changed my mind." "You changed your mind?" "Yes." "You sat on that couch," Raina pointed at the couch she was sitting on, "Tuesday night, and you cried, and you said, and I quote, 'I would rather eat my own hand than go to that thing.' Those were your words." "I remember what I said." "So what happened between Tuesday night and right now that made a grown woman decide to eat her own hand?" "Raina, I'm asking." Clara opened her mouth, closed it, opened it. "Someone's going with me." "A someone?" "Yes." "A male someone?" "Yes." "A male someone I know?" "No." "A male someone I should know?" Clara sat down on one of the wobbly kitchen chairs. She put her face in her hands for a second. Then she lifted it. "Raina," she said, "I need you to not freak out. That is an extremely alarming sentence. I know." "Clara, who is he?" He's a client, sort of. He's not a client. He lives in the building." "Which building?" "The Ardent." "The 40-something story one on 2nd. "Yes." "Which floor?" 47. Raina blinked once. "Clara," Raina said slowly, "the 47th floor of the Ardent is a penthouse." "I know." "One apartment." "I know." "Whose name is on it?" "Raina." "Whose name?" "Vincent Hale." Raina was very still for a moment. Then she stood up. She walked over to Clara. She put both hands flat on the kitchen table and leaned down until her face was level with Clara's. And she said, in a voice that was somehow softer than her regular voice, which made it more frightening, "Hale, as in Hale Maritime Holdings, Hale. As in, I saw his face on the cover of a magazine at the bodega last week, Hale. That one. Is taking you to your graduation gala." "Yes." "As in, has agreed to walk into a ballroom on a Saturday night with you, Clara Hayes, on his arm." "Yes." "Why?" Clara looked at the table. She thought about the stairwell. She thought about thank you for not laughing. She thought about the way he had stood on the other side of the island with his hands flat on the marble like a man steadying himself for something. "I don't know, Raina." "Clara, I don't. I really don't. He found me crying. On the back stairs, She stopped. She did not want to tell this part. It felt like a thing that belonged to her and him and the cold concrete step. "He was kind to me. And then this morning he said," she breathed, "he said he wanted to take me." "Said." "Yes. In words. In a lot of words, Raina. And you said yes." "I said yes." Raina straightened up. She turned around. She walked a little circle in the kitchen. She came back. She pointed at Clara. Okay, we are not panicking. We are not. We are going to the Brentmore on 86th, and we are going to find a dress that makes Madison Calloway swallow her own tongue, and we are going to do your hair, and we are not, Clara, we are not going to let a man with that much money buy anything because that is how stories start and not how they end. Are you hearing me? I'm hearing you. Good. Get up. Put real shoes on. Raina, I'm tired. No, ma'am. Madison Calloway does not get to laugh at you twice. Get up. So Clara got up. They went to the Brentmore on 86th, which was a consignment shop above a Thai restaurant, and they spent 2 hours pushing hangers along a metal rack in a small hot room at the back. And Clara tried on 7 things that didn't work, and 2 things that sort of worked, and 1 thing that made Raina put her hand over her mouth and sit down on the ottoman outside the dressing room. Oh, Raina said. Oh? Oh, Clara. It was a red dress. It was not a red dress like a girl wears to a party. It was a red dress like a woman wears to a room she intends to leave differently than she entered it. Deep, almost wine at the hem, brighter at the shoulders, a neckline that was not low but somehow made the line of her collarbone into a sentence. It had been consigned by a woman on the Upper East Side whose daughter had worn it once to a charity thing at the Met and then outgrown it according to the tag, in both the literal and the social sense. It fit Clara like it had been made for a smaller, quieter girl and then waited patiently on a rack for the right one to come find it. Clara looked at herself in the mirror. She did not recognize the person in the mirror. The person in the mirror had a long neck and a soft mouth and eyes that did not look today like the eyes of a girl who cleaned apartments on 2nd Avenue. The person in the mirror looked like she had, somewhere very far inside herself, been waiting a long time to be looked at, and had given up on it, and had not until this moment realized that the giving up was reversible. How much? Clara said without turning around. Raina checked the tag. $280. Raina, I can't. Clara, I swear on my mother's life, if you put that dress back on the rack, I will never speak to you again. $280 is rent. It's half of rent. It's Clara. It's a lot of money. It is, Raina said, and you have it. You have $2,000 and change in your savings because I have seen your bank app, because you leave it open on the couch, because you are a disaster. And you have never, in the 3 years I have known you, bought yourself one thing that was not a sandwich or a textbook. You are buying this dress. Clara looked at herself in the mirror again. She thought about the stairwell. She thought about you are going to walk into that room. Okay, she said quietly to the mirror. Okay? Okay. Raina made a small noise at the back of her throat that might have been a cheer or might have been a threat. She stood up. She took the tag. She marched to the counter. Clara heard her saying something sharp about consignment policies that Clara didn't try to follow. In the dressing room, Clara put her cheek against the cool glass of the mirror for a moment and closed her eyes. She thought very softly, "Don't let me be stupid." Then she got out of the dress, and she paid, and she carried it home in a long white garment bag across her arm like something alive. That was Thursday. Friday, Clara came in for her normal shift at the Ardent, and Vincent was not there. He had left early, Mrs. Ortega said, for a meeting in DCC that had come up on short notice. Clara did his apartment the way she always did his apartment. Changed the sheets on the bed he did not sleep in very much, wiped down the glass shower he used each morning, emptied the wastebasket in his study, which contained, as it always contained, a single crumpled printout of something and 2 used espresso pods. She stood in the doorway of the study for perhaps 30 seconds longer than her job required, looking at his desk, at the leather chair, at the small framed photograph on the credenza which she had dusted 100 times and had never really looked at before. It was a picture of a man in his 50s with a hand on the shoulder of a teenage boy in a dark suit. The man was smiling. The boy was not. The boy, she realized, was Vincent. The man, she assumed, was his father. She left the study. She finished her work. She rode down in the service elevator, and she went home, and on Saturday she did not work. And on Sunday she did her laundry. And on Monday she was back in the rotation, and Vincent was back from D.C., and there was, on the kitchen island, a small white envelope with her name on it in black ink. She stood in the kitchen with her cart, alone, because he had left for the office at 6. She opened the envelope. Inside was a card, cream, no letterhead, with 2 lines in the same black ink. Clara, Saturday the 14th, 7 p.m. Car will be downstairs at your building at 6:40. I'll be in it. V. She stood for a long time in the kitchen with that card in her hand. Then she put it in the inside pocket of her uniform, close to her collarbone, next to the thin gold chain her brother had sent her from Germany, and she went to work. The 2 weeks between that kitchen and the 14th of April were, for Clara Hayes, the longest 2 weeks of her life. For Vincent Hale, they were something worse, because he was not the kind of man who waited for anything. He had not waited in a line in a decade. He did not wait for his coffee. He had a machine. He did not wait for cars. They were there. He did not wait for people, because the people who kept him waiting were quickly no longer people in his life. And now he was waiting for a Saturday night, for a girl in a red dress he had not seen yet. For a moment he had built in his own head like a man who had no right to be building anything. He hated it. He also, on the rare honest morning, allowed himself to admit that he had not felt this awake in years. He worked the way he always worked, which was too much. But now the work had a strange, slanted quality to it, because underneath every spreadsheet and every call and every hand he shook, there was Clara in a stairwell, there was Clara with a coffee cup between her palms, there was Clara saying Vincent like she was testing a door to see if it opened. He talked to Davy twice a day. On the Thursday of the first week he said, "Davy, the gala. What's the theme?" Davy on speaker said, "Black tie, leading the next decade, which is, what everything's called. Why? What's the seating? Assigned. The school sends a list. Who's at our table?" A pause. "Boss?" "Davy. You bought the tickets last minute. They stuck you at table 19. Which is? The back of the room. Is that a problem?" "No, because I can saw." "No, Davy." "Okay." He thought about it for a minute. "Davy. Boss. Who's the keynote?" "A man named Richard Calloway. Westbrook Alumni Relations. They got him because his daughter's graduating." The silence on Vincent's end of the phone was long enough that Davy cleared his throat. "Boss? Calloway." "Yes." "Calloway," Vincent said, "who sits on the endowment committee at Westbrook Partners and whose firm does about $11 million a year in logistics with us." "Yes." Is that also not a problem?" "It's not a problem, Davy." "Got it. Get me on the phone with him by Friday." "Already done." Quietly. "Always." Vincent hung up. He sat at his desk for a moment, looking at his hands. His knuckles were white. He loosened them, one finger at a time. He did not call Clara. He had thought about calling her, had thought about texting her. He had her number now. Mrs. Ortega had given it to him when he told her, with a look that was half apology and half warning, that he was taking Miss Hayes to a personal event on the 14th and that Mrs. Ortega should consider Miss Hayes to be in good standing with the building regardless of anything she might hear from anyone else. Maria Ortega had looked at him over her reading glasses for a long moment and had said, "Mr. Hale, she's a good girl." And he had said, "Yes, ma'am, I know." And Maria Ortega had said nothing else, which Vincent understood to be, in the language of Maria Ortega, a warning shot across the bow of his entire life. He did not text her. He thought that to text her would be to turn this into the thing it was not. He had told her, in the kitchen, "You don't owe me this," and he had meant it, and the best way he had to mean it was to leave her alone until Saturday. So he left her alone until Saturday. He worked. He slept 4 hours a night. He went to D.C. and came back. He had a meeting on the Tuesday of the second week with Richard Calloway, in which they discussed, in an oak-paneled conference room on the 31st floor of Hale Maritime's headquarters, the renewal of a logistics contract. And at the very end, as Richard was standing up and shrugging into a camel overcoat, Vincent said without standing, "I hear your daughter's graduating." Richard paused, smiled, the smile of a man who had walked into doors like this for 40 years. "She is, Saturday, at Westbrook." Congratulations." "Thank you. She's a handful." "I'm sure." "You have kids, Vincent?" "No." "Wise man." Vincent smiled, small, polite. "I'll actually be at the gala." Richard blinked. "You will?" "I didn't realize. A friend's graduating from the business program." "Oh." Richard was adjusting his cufflink, trying to place it. "I didn't know Westbrook was on your radar, Vincent." "It wasn't." "Well, Richard laughed, a small, uncertain laugh. Small world. Very small, Richard. Vincent. My friend has had a hard time this year. She's a hard-working young woman. I'm sure she is. I would hate, Vincent said, in the tone he used when he was not actually hating anything at all, but wanted the other man in the room to believe he might be, to hear that anyone at the gala made the evening difficult for her. Richard's hand stopped on his cufflink. Vincent, he said. Richard, are we having a conversation? We are having a very small conversation. It is almost not a conversation. About my daughter. About your daughter's manners. Ah. Richard stood very still for a moment. Vincent watched him work through it. The contract, the endowment, the small stupid fact that his daughter had, apparently, embarrassed the wrong girl in front of the wrong billionaire, and arrive, as men like Richard always arrived, at the correct conclusion. Madison is, Richard said carefully, a spirited young woman. I'm sure she is. I will. He coughed. I will have a word with her. That would be kind of you. Yes, Richard, Vincent. I'm not asking you to scare her. I'm not asking you to call her. I'm asking you as a father to consider what you would like said to your daughter on the night she graduates from college, and to consider that what happens Saturday is up to her. Richard looked at him for a long moment. Then he laughed, very quietly, and it was a real laugh, and he shook his head. Jesus, Vincent. Richard, you are your father's son. I've been told. Richard buttoned his coat. He reached out and shook Vincent's hand, the handshake of a man who has just agreed, without having it said out loud, to a thing he did not fully understand the shape of. I'll see you Saturday, he said. I look forward to it. Do I get to know who the young lady is? No. Richard laughed again. He left. Vincent sat at the conference table for a long moment after he was gone, and he looked down at his own hands on the oak, and he thought, with a small cold detachment that did not for once feel like detachment at all, I'm doing too much. He thought, I don't care. And then he went back to his office, and he worked until 11 at night, and when he went home, he stood in the kitchen and did not pour himself anything to drink, and he looked at the back door to the service hallway for a long time before he turned off the light. Saturday came the way Saturdays come, which is to say, all at once, after a long week of not coming. Clara woke up at 6 in the morning in Washington Heights, because she had not really slept. She had lain in the dark listening to Raina snore through the wall and the radiator in the living room hiss, and a man on the street 3 floors down arguing with someone who was not there, and she had, at 4:30, given up and made tea. At 9, Raina took her to a girl Raina knew in East Harlem who did blowouts for $30 in her mother's kitchen. The girl was 20, maybe, and chewed gum the whole time and did Clara's hair into a low twist at the back of her head that left her neck bare and made her look, when she turned her head, like a different animal. Oh, honey, the girl said when she was done. Whoever this is for, he don't deserve you, but you go get him anyway. At 2, Raina sat Clara on the toilet with the lid down and did her makeup, and Clara did not fight her on any of it. Not the contour, not the gold on the inside of her eyelid, not the red on her mouth that was the same red, almost exactly, as the dress hanging on the back of the bathroom door. At 5, Clara was in the red dress. She stood in the hallway of the apartment looking at herself in the full-length mirror Raina had hung on the closet door with industrial tape. She did not speak. Raina behind her did not speak. After a minute, Raina said quietly, Clara, you are going to ruin that man. Clara tried to laugh. It came out wrong. Her eyes were too bright. She said, Raina, he's not mine to ruin. Not yet, Raina said, but look at yourself. At 6:15, Clara put on her coat. It was her old black wool coat, the one with the button missing on the cuff, and she hated how it looked over the dress. But it was April and the wind off the river was still cold. She would take it off at the door of the hotel. That was the plan. At 6:30, she picked up the small black clutch that had once been her grandmother's and put her phone and her ID and a tube of the red lipstick and a single tissue inside it. At 6:40, she walked down the 4 flights of stairs, carefully in the low heels, and she pushed open the front door of her building, and she stepped out onto the sidewalk of a quiet street in Washington Heights, and there was a black car at the curb. Of course there was. She had known there would be. She had not somehow believed it would be real until she saw it. The back door opened. Vincent Hale got out. He was in a black tuxedo. Not a rented one. Not a fashionable one. The old kind. The kind that had been cut for a body by a human being who had measured that body, and it fit him the way his silence fit his penthouse, like it had been bought at enormous expense to do one thing and do it without comment. His hair was combed. He had shaved. He looked, standing on the curb of a street in Washington Heights at 6:40 on a Saturday night, like a man from a different country. He saw her. He stopped. For a second, for a real, ungraceful second, Vincent Hale, who had stood across from men with guns, who had buried his father before he was 20, who had not, in the memory of anyone who worked for him, been visibly surprised by anything, just looked at her. Then he said, "Clara." She said, "Vincent, you..." He started. He stopped. He tried again. "You look..." "Don't," she said quickly, and she was smiling. She couldn't help smiling. "Don't say anything nice, or I'm going to cry, and Raina will kill me." He laughed. It was a short, surprised laugh. It was not a laugh she had ever heard out of him. "All right," he said. "All right. Get in." He held the door for her. She got in. The car smelled like leather and a faint, clean cologne that was probably not, she thought, the cologne he wore every day, because she had cleaned his bathroom 100 times, and she knew what he wore every day. And this was not it. This was, she realized with a small private thrill, a cologne he had chosen for tonight. He got in on the other side. He closed the door. The driver, a man in his 50s with a thick neck, looked at Vincent in the rear view. Vincent nodded once. The car pulled away from the curb. For a block, neither of them spoke. Clara looked down at her hands in her lap. Her grandmother's clutch was slightly too small for her fingers to hold properly. She gripped it anyway. "Clara." "Yes." "Look at me." She looked at him. His face was very close in the back of the car, closer than she had been prepared for. The streetlights were going past in slow yellow stripes across his cheekbones. His eyes, in the dim light, were not the cold gray she had thought they were for 2 years. They were gray, yes, but warmer than that, browner at the edges, the gray of wet stones in a riverbed. "I need to tell you something before we get there." "Okay." "I have known Richard Calloway for 6 years. Madison Calloway is his daughter." Claire's breath caught. I want you to know," he said, "before we walk in, that I had a conversation with Richard on Tuesday, a very short one. I did not tell him your name. I did not tell him what Madison did. I told him only that a young woman I was bringing as my guest had been unkindly treated by his daughter, and I asked him, as a father, to think about what he would like said to her on the night of her graduation. That is all I did. And I want you to know it because I made a promise to myself that I would not, with you, do anything behind your back." Clara looked at him for a long moment. The car slowed at a light. "Vincent," she said. She had used his first name twice now. It was getting easier. "Why did you do that?" "Because I could." "That's not a reason." "No," he said. "It's not." She waited. He looked out the window for a second, then back at her. "I did it," he said, "because the thought of walking into that room with you on my arm and watching one of those girls try to make a joke at your expense and having to stand there and pretend I had not known it was possible, I could not do it. I couldn't. I'm sorry if that was not mine to do. I am telling you now because it is yours to know." Clara sat with that. The light changed. The car moved. "You know what?" she said quietly. "What?" "I think I'm glad you did it." "Clara." "No, let me say this." She turned in the seat, the red dress whispering against the leather. "For 2 weeks I have been terrified. Do you know that? I have been terrified of walking into that room. I have been so terrified that twice this week I almost called Mrs. Ortega and told her I was quitting so I would not have to see you on Monday and tell you I wasn't going. And I didn't call her. Because I wanted, more than I have wanted anything in a long time, to walk into that room. And now you are telling me that I am walking into it and you have already made it a little less dangerous for me. And she breathed. "I'm not going to pretend to be offended, Vincent. I'm not that good of a person." He looked at her. His mouth did that thing again, the small thing that was almost a smile. "Okay," he said. Okay. Clara. Yes. May I? He stopped. He sounded for the first time uncertain. May I hold your hand? She laughed, a small, startled laugh. I. Yes. Yes, you may. He took her hand. His hand was warm and large and slightly rough at the palm, which she had not expected. She had expected him to have hands like the apartment, smooth and impersonal, and instead he had hands that had, somewhere, done things. He laced his fingers through hers slowly, as if he were giving her time to change her mind. She did not change her mind. He closed his hand around hers. He did not squeeze. They rode like that the rest of the way downtown. They did not speak. Clara watched the city go past the window. The bridges in the distance, the midtown towers lit up against the purple sky, the yellow streak of a taxi turning onto Fifth. And she thought very clearly, I will remember this car ride for the rest of my life. At 7:02, the car pulled up in front of the Landmark Hotel. The Landmark was old. Old in the way New York buildings were old, which is to say built in 1910 and lovingly destroyed and lovingly restored 3 times since. The entrance was under a long green awning with gold lettering. There was a red carpet that was not, tonight, a real red carpet, but the hotel had rolled out a small strip of it anyway because Westbrook had paid them enough. And on either side of the carpet, there were small velvet ropes holding back exactly no one. There were, however, people going in. Clara saw them through the tinted window, girls she knew, girls she had studied with, a boy named Trevor in a tuxedo a size too small, a cluster of parents in cocktail dresses and dark suits, and, her stomach went cold, Madison Calloway, in a pale blue satin sheath, on the arm of a boy Clara did not recognize, laughing at something as she walked up the carpet. Clara's hand tightened, involuntarily, in Vincent's. He felt it. He turned his head. Clara? Yes. Listen to me. I'm listening. You're about to walk into that hotel with me, he said quietly, steadily. And you are going to do exactly one thing, which is breathe. That is the only thing I am asking of you tonight. I'm going to handle the rest. I'm going to walk in with my hand on the small of your back, and I'm going to introduce you to the people I need to introduce you to. And when the other things happen, and they will happen, I will be standing next to you. And nothing in that room can touch you that does not also touch me. Do you understand? Yes. Say it back to me. Breathe. You handle the rest. Good. Vincent? Yes. I'm scared. I know. Are you scared? He looked at her for a long second, and then Vincent Hale did something she did not expect. He lifted her hand, still in his, and he turned it, and he pressed the back of it against his mouth. Not a kiss, not exactly, just the warmth of his lips against her knuckles for one slow breath, and he put her hand back down on her lap and let go. Yes, he said. A little. Okay. Okay? Okay? He got out of the car. He walked around to her side. The doorman had already opened her door, and Vincent nodded at the doorman, and the doorman stepped back, and Vincent held out his hand. Clara took off her old black coat inside the car and left it on the seat. She stepped out onto the curb in the red dress. It was, she would remember, colder than she had expected, and the wind off the avenue moved the skirt of the dress around her knees, and somewhere a car horn sounded, and Vincent's hand was under her elbow, and they were walking up the small strip of red carpet toward the doors of the Landmark Hotel, and the couple in front of them was already turning, already looking, because the man beside her was a man you turned around to look at. And then, because the universe is sometimes a storyteller with a sense of timing, Madison Calloway stepped out of the revolving door with a cocktail napkin in her hand and a bored expression on her face. And her eyes flicked, the way eyes flick in a room you are not really paying attention to, across the carpet, and she registered in the split second it took 2 things, the tuxedo and then the girl. Her face did a thing Clara would replay later in the dark, for weeks. A complete thing. First, a flash of appreciation because Madison Calloway was not blind, and the man in the tuxedo was the man in the tuxedo. Then recognition, because she knew who he was. She had seen his face in the same magazines everyone else had seen his face in. Then confusion. Then, and this was the part Clara would remember, the small, tight drop at the corners of her mouth, when her eyes moved the 6 inches from him to the woman on his arm, and she realized, properly realized, with her whole face, who the woman was. Madison Calloway's mouth opened. No sound came out. She took a small step back. Clara kept walking. She did not slow down. She did not look at Madison. She looked straight ahead at the gold-lettered doors, and she walked past Madison Calloway on the arm of Vincent Hale in a red dress that cost $280, and the only sign she gave that she had even registered that Madison was standing there was a very small, very polite, "Good evening, Madison," as they passed, in the same mild tone she had used 100 times to say good morning to men like Vincent in hallways in the Ardent. Madison made a sound that was not quite a word. They were already through the door. Inside the lobby, the ceilings were 20 feet high, and there was a chandelier made of, apparently, 1,000 small glass leaves, and the floor was black and white marble, and everything smelled like the particular expensive perfume of ballrooms. Vincent did not stop. His hand moved in one smooth gesture from her elbow to the small of her back, and he guided her across the marble toward the wide doors of the grand ballroom. And Clara, who had never in her life been touched like that by a man, not possessively, not controllingly, just knowingly, the way a man touches a woman he is walking with and not past, forgot, for the span of about 4 steps, how to breathe. At the door of the ballroom, a young woman in a black dress was checking names off a list. Vincent said, "Hale, +1. The young woman looked down at her list, looked up, looked back down. Her eyes went a little wider, her mouth tightened professionally. "Of course, Mr. Hale. Welcome to Westbrook. You're at table 19, I know." Actually, she looked at him with a small, tight smile. "There's been an update, sir. You've been moved." Clara felt Vincent's hand still on her back. "Moved?" "Yes, sir. You and Miss—" The young woman looked at the list. "Hayes, you've been moved to table 2. Vincent's hand did not move. His face did not change. But Clara, who had spent the last 20 minutes with her hand in his and her body within 6 inches of his body, felt something through the palm on her back, a very small, very contained thing that might have been a man being surprised. "Table 2, he repeated mildly. "Yes, sir." "Who's at table 2? "The keynote, Mr. Calloway, and his family, and some of our alumni board, and—" Her eyes came up. She was well trained. She was trying not to stare at Clara. "And Dean Whitaker." "I see. There was a request, sir, from the Calloways." "A request?" "Yes, sir. Earlier this evening, Mr. Calloway asked the school to extend a personal courtesy." "Did he?" "Yes, sir." Vincent was quiet for a second. Then he said quietly to Clara, and only to Clara, "Still breathing?" "Still breathing," Clara whispered. "All right." He turned to the young woman. He smiled, not his polite business smile, the other one, the small, real one. "Thank you," he said. "We'll find our way." And his hand, firm and warm on the small of her back, guided Clara Hayes past the doors of the grand ballroom, into a room of 500 people under a ceiling of chandeliers, and the ones near the door turned first, and then the ones further in, and the sound of the room, the low, polite murmur of 500 people pretending not to watch each other, did a thing, a shift, a drop, a listen, the way a room does when something new has walked into it. And Clara Hayes, who 2 weeks before had sat on a cold step in a stairwell and cried because the people who were supposed to be her friends had laughed at her for being nobody, walked into her own graduation in a red dress, on the arm of the last man any of them would ever have expected, and kept her chin up and kept breathing. And somewhere at the edge of her vision, she saw Madison Calloway come back through the lobby door behind her, and stop, and stand, and not move. And Clara did not turn her head to look. She did not need to. Vincent's hand was on her back, and the room was quiet around them. And for the first time in her entire adult life, Clara Hayes was not the person in the room nobody had seen. She was the person the room had stopped for. The quiet did not last. It never does in rooms like that. A ballroom of 500 people is a living thing, and the thing it does best is recover from surprise. Within perhaps 4 seconds of Clara and Vincent crossing the threshold, the murmur started up again, low and careful, the way the ocean starts up again after a wave has gone through. A waiter in a white jacket moved past them with a tray of champagne flutes. A woman in green silk laughed at something, too loud, the kind of laugh a person uses to prove they have not been looking. Somewhere toward the center of the room, a string quartet was working its way through a version of a song Clara almost recognized and could not place. Vincent did not speed up. He did not slow down. His hand stayed where it was, warm and steady at the small of her back, and he walked her through the room at the pace of a man who had never once in his life felt a reason to hurry. "Keep your eyes forward," he said, very low, not moving his lips very much. "Don't search for them. Let them come to us." "Okay." "You're doing fine." "My knees are shaking." "No one can see it." "You sure?" "I'm sure." They made it 6 steps before the first one came. A woman, 50s, expensive blonde, the kind that cost 4 hours in a chair on Madison Avenue every 6 weeks. She was wearing navy, and she was holding a wine glass she was not drinking from, and her eyes were very bright. "Vincent," she said, stepping into their path as if they had agreed in advance to meet her. "I didn't know you were coming tonight. Eleanor." He stopped. He did not, Clara noticed, take his hand off her back. "Good to see you." "And who is this?" "This is Clara Hayes." "Clara, Eleanor Whitford. Eleanor sits on the board of the Whitford Foundation." "Oh," Clara managed a smile. "It's nice to meet you." Eleanor's eyes did the exact thing Madison's had done, an inventory and 2 quick flicks. Up, down. A small, tight settling. "And how do you two know each other?" Eleanor said, to Vincent, not to Clara. "Clara is graduating tonight." Oh, how wonderful. From the business program." "Westbrook's business program?" "That's the one, Eleanor. Yes." There was a small silence. Eleanor took a sip of the wine she was not drinking. "Well," she said brightly, "how lovely. Vincent, you must introduce me to— Where did you say you two— "I didn't." "Oh, I see." "Eleanor, we're going to go find our table." Of course, of course. Good to see you." "Good to see you, Vincent." He steered Clara past her. Clara did not look back. She could feel like a draft, Eleanor Whitford's eyes on her shoulder blades for the full 10 seconds it took them to clear her line of sight. "Who is she really?" Clara said under her breath. "She runs a foundation that my mother used to run. She has disliked me, personally, for about 14 years. She will talk about us for exactly the time it takes her to find the next person to talk to, and then she will forget your name. Don't worry about her." "You just introduced me to her." Yes." "Why?" "Because by tomorrow afternoon," Vincent said, "there will not be a person in this social circle who has not heard your name, and I wanted it to come out of my mouth first, with yours attached to it, in a room where they could see you." Clara did not quite know what to say to that. "You are," she said, "a very strategic man." "I've been told." They reached table 2. Table 2 was round, draped in white linen, set for 10 with plates and stemware that did not belong to a hotel and therefore had been brought in, which meant someone had brought them in on short notice for a Saturday night, which meant someone at Westbrook had been making phone calls that afternoon. Clara registered this and filed it. She was starting to understand, a little, how the world worked when Vincent Hale decided to look at it. Richard Calloway was already at the table. He was a large man, not fat, but substantial, in a tuxedo that fit him the way Vincent's fit Vincent, which is to say, expensively. He had Madison's pale eyes and a full head of silver hair and the slightly reddened complexion of a man who had been drinking at country clubs for 40 years. On his right sat a woman who could only be Madison's mother, wire-thin in gray silk, with a tennis bracelet that caught the light every time she moved her hand. On his left sat a man Clara recognized from the Westbrook website as Dean Whitaker, and next to Whitaker sat a man and a woman Clara did not know, but who had both the unmistakable look of money that had been in the family long enough to make the people who held it faintly tired of it. Every one of them was looking at her. Richard Calloway stood up. He was, Clara noticed, the only man at the table who stood. "Vincent," he said. "Richard. This must be Clara Hayes." "Clara, Richard Calloway. I believe you have met his daughter." Richard's eyes stayed on Clara. His smile did not falter, but something in his shoulders did, a half-inch drop, a small acknowledgement. "Miss Hayes," he said, It is a genuine pleasure to meet you. Congratulations on your graduation. Thank you, Mr. Calloway. Please. Richard? Richard. I don't believe my daughter has had the pleasure of a proper introduction. Clara held his eyes. She kept her face very even. She realized somewhere under the noise of her own pulse, not afraid of him. She had been afraid of him 30 seconds ago. She was not, now. We've met, she said mildly. Madison and I studied together. Did you? For 3 years. I see. It's a small program. Yes. Richard cleared his throat. He glanced very briefly at his wife. His wife's mouth was doing a thing. Well, I hope tonight you will allow me to rectify any impression my daughter may have given you that fell short of our family's hospitality. Vincent said nothing. Clara said gently, That's not necessary, Mr. Calloway. It was just girls being girls. There was a very small silence at the table. Dean Whitaker said, Please, sit. We saved these seats for you. Vincent pulled out Clara's chair. She sat. He sat beside her. The chair was heavy, upholstered in dark green. There was a small card on her plate with her name on it, handwritten in real ink on real cream card stock. Clara Hayes. She looked at it for a second longer than she needed to. Then she tucked it under her bread plate, out of sight, because she did not trust herself, yet to look at her own name on expensive paper without her eyes doing something she did not want them to do in front of Madison Calloway's mother. Dinner came. Clara did not eat most of it. She would not remember later what was on the plate. She remembered that her hand shook once when she lifted her water glass, and Vincent, without looking at her, moved his own water glass about a half-inch closer to her plate so she would not have to reach. And she understood, in that small mechanical gesture, that he was tracking her the way a bodyguard tracks a principal, aware at all times of where her body was in the room, and that he had not decided this tonight, he had decided it earlier, possibly days earlier, and that he was going to do it whether she noticed or not. She noticed. The conversation at the table moved, cautiously, the way conversation moves in a room where everyone has agreed, without saying so, to be on their best behavior. Dean Whitaker asked Clara about her thesis. Clara said it had been on supply chain resilience in regional healthcare systems, and she said it the way she had said it in her defense, flat and sure, and without the little hedges she put around it at parties, because she had noticed very quickly that this was not a table where hedges helped her. Whitaker lit up. He asked a follow-up. She answered it. Richard Calloway's wife, her name was Leslie, Clara learned, leaned forward slightly, interested despite herself, and asked whether Clara had considered consulting. And Clara said she had. And Leslie said, My cousin's son went into that and he never sees his children. And that small real thing, that actual mother sentence, broke something at the table. And the man Clara didn't know started telling a story about his own daughter at Columbia. And the ice at the table, slowly, began to thin. Vincent, for his part, said very little. He did not, Clara realized, have to. He sat at her left shoulder like a wall a person cannot walk through, and every time someone at the table so much as glanced in her direction with any sharpness, his eyes moved, the smallest amount, and the sharpness stopped. He was not being rude. He was not being anything. He was simply present, the way a mountain is present, and his presence reorganized the way the light fell on the rest of the table. At 9, dessert came. At 9:15, Dean Whitaker stood up and went to the podium at the front of the ballroom, and the room quieted, and he made a speech. He welcomed them. He thanked the donors. He introduced Richard Calloway, who made a shorter speech and did not, Clara noticed, say the word hospitality once. Madison Calloway, Clara saw from the corner of her eye, was sitting at a different table, table 4, close to the front, with a cluster of girls from the cohort, Emily and Brianna and the others who had laughed in the library. Madison was not looking at the podium. She was looking at table 2. She had been looking at table 2 since the moment Clara sat down, and she had not, in Clara's estimation, eaten a bite. Clara did not look back at her. Clara had decided somewhere in the middle of the salad course that she was not going to look at Madison Calloway at all tonight, unless Madison came to her. And she had decided this not out of pettiness, but out of a strange, tired clarity. She was tired of thinking about Madison. She had thought about Madison for 10 days. She wanted, for the rest of the night, to think about the man sitting next to her instead. At 9:40, the quartet moved off the small stage, and a DJ took their place, and a few of the professors and their spouses moved out onto the polished parquet in the cleared center of the room, the way they always did at these things. The first dancers, the ones who break the ice for the students. And it was during this small scuffle of chairs and laughter that Madison Calloway at last came across the room. She came alone. She had at least the decency for that. She stopped beside Clara's chair, and Vincent, very quietly, did not turn his head. He kept eating a small spoonful of creme brulee as though he were in a different room. Clara. Clara looked up. Madison. Madison's chin was up. Her eyes were a little wet. She had, up close, very good skin and a small tight mouth and a necklace that Clara happened to know because she had seen the exact one on the nightstand in Mrs. Whitford's bedroom 3 weeks ago cost the better part of a car. Clara, I owe you an apology. Clara waited. For the other week, at the library, what I said about your job, it wasn't kind of me. Clara looked at her. Clara looked at her for long enough that Madison's eyes slid once to Vincent and came back. Madison, Clara said, are you apologizing because you're sorry or because your father told you to? Madison's mouth opened, closed. Her face went red from the collarbones up. Both, Madison said. At last. It was, Clara thought, the first honest thing she had ever heard out of Madison Calloway's mouth. Okay, Clara said. Okay? Okay. I accept your apology. I accept your apology, Madison, and congratulations on your graduation. Madison stared at her. Clara very gently turned back to her dessert. After a moment, Madison made a small, confused sound and walked away, and Clara did not watch her go, and at her left shoulder, so quiet she almost did not catch it, Vincent Hale said, in a voice pitched for her ear only, "Good girl." And something low and warm turned over in her stomach. She set her spoon down. "Vincent?" she said, without looking at him. Did you just say good girl to me at a table with a dean at it?" "I did, yes." "Don't do that again tonight." "No? Not at this table." "Noted." "Thank you." He made a small sound that was not quite a laugh. He put his spoon down, too. He looked at her, finally, from the side, and Clara turned her head, and for a second, at table 2, in a ballroom full of 500 people, it was very quiet between them. "Dance with me," he said. "Now?" "Before the students get out there. Before it's crowded. Before you lose your nerve." "I'm not going to lose my nerve." "Dance with me anyway." "Vincent." "Yes." "I don't know how to dance." "You do not need to know how to dance. You need to stand on a wooden floor with one hand on my shoulder and let me move you around. Come on." He stood up. He held out his hand. Clara looked at it. She looked at the room. Madison Calloway was back at table 4, leaning over and whispering furiously to Brianna. Dean Whitaker was laughing at something Richard Calloway had said. Eleanor Whitford, across the ballroom, was watching table 2 with a wineglass still not at her lips. Clara put her hand in Vincent's. He led her out onto the floor. The song was something slow, a cover, a woman's voice over a piano, a song Clara would not remember the name of later because she would remember everything else, and the name would fall through a hole in her memory that had opened, specifically to make room for the feel of Vincent's hand finding the small of her back. He put his other hand on hers, closed it, pulled her in. Not tight. He did not pull her tight. He pulled her into the specific distance at which a man dances with a woman in public when he is the kind of man who does not need to pretend anything. And at that distance, Claire discovered, she could feel the warmth of him through the front of her dress, through her ribs, a vertical line of heat from his chest to his knees that was not touching her and somehow was. "Look at me," he said. She looked up. The ballroom was gone. The ballroom was still there. She could hear it, could feel it at the edges of her vision, could feel the eyes. But the ballroom was, for a moment, gone. Because the only thing in the middle of her field of vision was Vincent Hale's face, closer than it had been in the car. The gray of his eyes very warm under the chandeliers, a small line at the corner of his mouth that, she realized, was him trying not to smile. "There she is," he said quietly. "Who?" "The girl in the red dress." "Vincent." "Yes." "I'm going to forget how to walk if you keep saying things like that." Okay, okay. He turned her once, slowly, the way a man turns a woman who has never been turned, which is to say telegraphing it with the hand at her back so she did not miss the cue, and she did not miss it. And when she came back around, his hand tightened, the smallest amount, on her spine, and she understood, with a small jolt of something she was not ready to name, that he was proud of her. "You did very well at that table," he said. "Did I?" "Very well." "I was terrified." "I know." "You could tell?" "I could feel it through the chair." "Oh, it's all right." "You weren't scared." "I was scared," he said. "Earlier, in the car. Now I am not scared." "Why now?" He was quiet for a second. They moved. A professor in a tweed jacket danced his wife past them. She waved at Dean Whitaker over his shoulder. The song changed, the singer's voice climbing. "Because," Vincent said finally, "I know now that you are going to be all right. Whatever I do, whatever I don't do, you, Clara Hayes, are going to be all right." "Vincent." That sounded like goodbye." "It wasn't." "It sounded like it." "It wasn't. I am telling you. I am telling you that I have spent 2 weeks, maybe longer, I don't know, I've lost count. I've spent 2 weeks worried in a quiet way that I was going to walk into this room and stand next to you and watch you be small again. And I came here tonight ready to protect you. And I've been standing here at this table for 2 hours, and I have realized slowly that I have overprepared. You don't need me to protect you. You needed me to walk you in, that's all." Clara was quiet. They moved. "I'm still glad you walked me in," she said. "I'm still glad I walked you in." "Vincent." "Yes." May I ask you something?" "Anything." "In the stairwell." "Yes." You said you had been standing at your kitchen counter staring at a glass of whiskey you weren't going to drink because you couldn't think of a single thing worth doing." He did not answer for a moment. His hand on her back was very still. "Yes," he said. "Why?" "Why what?" "Why couldn't you think of a single thing worth doing?" His jaw did something. She felt it more than saw it, the muscle going tight and then loose, as if he were physically choosing, in real time, whether to answer her truthfully or not. The song slowed. They were turning in a small circle now, barely moving, the dance a thin excuse to keep standing 3 inches apart in the middle of a room. "Clara," he said. "Yes, I'm going to tell you something, and I want you to listen, and I do not want you to try to fix it, and I do not want you to feel sorry for me." "Okay." "My father died when I was 19. He died on the kitchen floor of an apartment in Connecticut, while I was standing at the sink washing a coffee cup. I heard the sound he made. I turned around. I watched him fall. I called 911. He was dead when they got there. He was dead probably before they were out the door." She did not say anything. His hand stayed where it was. "I took over his company at 24. I have run it for a decade. I am very, very good at it. I have, in 10 years, doubled the revenue, tripled the margins, and made, by every measurable metric, the exact kind of man my father wanted me to be. And for about 6 years now, I've been standing in very nice rooms at the end of very successful days and discovering that I cannot find the part of me that is supposed to enjoy any of it." "Vincent, I'm almost done, okay? And on Tuesday night, I heard somebody crying in my stairwell, and I opened the door, and I found you. And for the length of time we sat on that step, I was not thinking about my father, and I was not thinking about my company, and I was not thinking about the Reinhardt deal or the price of oil or whether my mother is going to call me on Sunday. I was thinking about you. And it was the first time in I don't know how long. And I came back up to my kitchen, and I stood at the window, and I thought, very clearly, if I let that girl walk out of this building on Friday without saying anything to her, I am going to regret it for a very long time. So you didn't let me walk out. So I didn't let you walk out." "Vincent?" "Yes. I think I need you to kiss me." He stopped turning. He stopped moving. His hand on her back did not tighten. It didn't need to. Her whole body was already pulled toward his as if gravity, in their small 3-inch patch of parquet, had rotated 90 degrees. "Here?" he said, very low. Vincent. Clara, this room. I know where we are. You understand what this will do. I understand. You understand that tomorrow morning there will be no one in this school, in that company, on that board, who does not know that I kissed you on the dance floor tonight. Yes. You understand what that will do to your life. Yes? Clara. Vincent. She tipped her chin up. Her eyes, he would later think, were the steadiest he had ever seen them. I have been invisible in your life for 2 years, and in this program for 5 years, and in my own life for 23. I am tired of being invisible. If you don't want to kiss me, say so now, and I will go sit down and we will finish our coffee, and on Monday I will come back and clean your apartment, and we will never speak of this again. And I will love you a little, quietly, from the kitchen for the rest of my life, and you will never know. But if you do want to kiss me, do it now, in this dress, in this room, because I earned this dress, and I earned this room, and I earned a man who is not afraid to kiss me in it. She stopped talking. Her heart was beating against the wall of her chest in a way she could feel in her throat. For one breath, Vincent Hale did not move, and Clara Hayes thought, very clearly, I just said too much. Then his hand came up off the small of her back and slid along her jaw, thumb brushing just under her ear, and he tilted her chin up the last quarter-inch it needed to tilt, and Vincent Hale kissed her in the middle of the grand ballroom of the Landmark Hotel at 9:57 on a Saturday night, in front of Richard Calloway, Dean Whitaker, Eleanor Whitford, Madison Calloway, and 495 other people. It was not a long kiss. It did not need to be. It was the kind of kiss a man gives a woman when he has decided finally that he is not going to be careful anymore. And the fact that it was not a long kiss, the fact that it was closed-mouthed and almost courtly, only made it worse, because a man who knew how to kiss a woman in public like that was a man who knew how to kiss a woman in private like something else entirely, and every person in the room who had ever been kissed like that once in their lives understood. And the ones who hadn't understood too. The song was still playing. He pulled back. His hand was still on her jaw. Clara, he said. Vincent. I want to take you home. Yes. Not to my apartment. To your apartment. I'm going to take you to your apartment, and I'm going to walk you to your door, and I'm going to go home to mine, and I'm going to do this properly. Okay. Is that all right? Yes. All right. He dropped his hand. He took her hand. He walked her slowly off the dance floor. The room had gone, in the technical sense, completely quiet, except for the music, which no one seemed to have told the DJ to turn off. Vincent did not look at anyone. Clara did not look at anyone. They walked hand in hand past table 2. Richard Calloway did not stand up. Dean Whitaker, bless him, lifted his wine glass a very small amount in their direction, a gesture so dry it was almost invisible. Leslie Calloway's mouth was open. The tennis bracelet caught the light. They walked past table 4. Clara did look once at Madison Calloway. Madison Calloway was not smiling. Madison Calloway was not sneering. Madison Calloway was crying, silently, a little, in the way girls cry when they have just realized that a rule they thought applied to everyone, in fact, had not applied to the girl they spent 3 years laughing at. Clara did not smile at her. Clara did not need to. She turned her face forward, and she walked, on Vincent's arm, out of the grand ballroom of the Landmark Hotel. And the quiet behind her was the quiet a room makes when it is trying to decide, all at once, what it has just witnessed. The coat-check girl handed Clara her old black wool coat without quite being able to look her in the eye. Vincent held it open. Clara put her arms in. He did not button it for her. He waited for her to do it. She realized with a small warm jolt that this was on purpose. He was not, she understood now, a man who dressed his woman. He was a man who handed her the coat and let her close it herself. On the curb, the black car was already there. They got in. The door closed. The driver looked at Vincent in the rear view. Sir? Washington Heights, Vincent said. Miss Hayes's building? Yes, sir. The car pulled away from the Landmark. For the first 2 blocks, neither of them spoke. Clara's hands were shaking, properly shaking now, in her lap. Her lipstick was, she realized, completely gone. Her mouth felt very soft. She could still feel the place where his thumb had been under her ear. Vincent? Yes. I can't feel my face. He laughed. It was the second time that night. He reached across the seat and took her hand, and this time he did not ask first. I know. I think I am in shock. A little, probably. Did that really just happen? Yes. In front of Dean Whitaker? Yes. In front of Madison? Yes. Vincent? Yes. I don't regret it. I know you don't. Do you regret it? He did not answer immediately. She turned her head. He was looking out the window. The streetlights were doing their slow yellow walk across his face again. She could not, for a second, read his expression. And then, slowly, he turned to her, and she saw, for the first time really, the face underneath the face he wore in the world, the younger face, the face of the boy in the photograph on his credenza. And he said, Clara, I have been a very careful man for a very long time, and I just did the least careful thing I have done in a decade, and I can't find anywhere inside myself anything that looks like regret. I am, if you want to know, a little frightened. I am, if you want to know, not entirely sure what the morning is going to feel like, but I do not regret it. Okay? Okay. Vincent. Yes. Will you tell me if you do? In the morning. If tomorrow in the daylight you look at what you did and you think you made a mistake, will you tell me? Please. Don't disappear. Don't stop answering the phone. Tell me. I'm asking you. His hand tightened on hers. Clara, please. I will tell you. Promise me. I promise you. The car turned up the West Side Highway. The river on their left was black and moving with small broken lights. Clara watched it for a minute, and then she rested her head, very carefully, against Vincent's shoulder. And Vincent Hale, who had not, in living memory, had a woman put her head on his shoulder in the back of a car, went very still for about 2 seconds. And then he lifted his arm and put it around her shoulders. And he closed his hand on the outside of her upper arm. And he held her the rest of the way uptown. At Clara's building, the car pulled up. The driver discreetly looked straight ahead. Vincent got out. He walked around. He opened her door. He gave her his hand. She stood up on the sidewalk in the red dress with her old coat over it, in front of the brownstone with the cracked third step and the buzzer that didn't work right in the rain. And Vincent Hale walked her up the stoop, and at the front door he stopped. He did not come inside. He had said he would not, and he did not. Clara. Vincent, I'm going to call you in the morning. Okay? I'm going to call you at a reasonable hour. Okay? I am not going to disappear. Okay? And I'm going to see you again, soon. Tomorrow, if you'll have me. Or the day after. Whenever. I am telling you so that if I do not show up in the next 72 hours, you will know I am lying. Vincent. Yes. Come here. He came there. She went up on her toes in the low heels, and she put her hand on the side of his face, and she kissed him once, softly, at the door of her building in Washington Heights. And it was not the kiss in the ballroom. It was a different kiss, a plainer one, a kiss with nobody in it but the two of them. When she pulled back, his eyes were closed. He opened them. Go inside, he said. It's cold. Okay. Go. She went. At the top of the stoop, she turned around. He was still there. He did not move until she had the door open and was through it. Then he walked, slowly, back down the stoop, and he got into the car, and the car pulled away. Inside, Clara climbed the 4 flights very slowly, because her legs were not, technically, working right, and she let herself into the apartment. Raina was on the couch in pajamas, watching a cooking show on her laptop. She looked up when Clara came in. She looked at Clara. She closed her laptop. Clara Marie. Don't. Your lipstick is on your chin. Raina. Clara. Clara sat down on the edge of the couch. She put her face in her hands. She did not cry. She laughed. She laughed a small, raw, disbelieving laugh, the laugh of a woman who had just walked out of a room that had never before had her in it, and she looked up at Raina and she said, in a voice that was very thin and very steady, Raina, I think he's in love with me. Raina looked at her for a long second. Girl, she said, I think he is too. And somewhere, across the river, On the 47th floor of the Ardent Tower, a man in a tuxedo stood at his kitchen window with his hands in his pockets and did not pour himself a drink, and did not look at his phone, and did not, for a long time, move at all. He stood at the glass, and he watched the lights of the city, and he thought, for the first time in a decade, that he was afraid, and for the first time in his life, that he did not want to be anywhere else. He did not call. That was the first thing she noticed on Sunday morning. Clara Hayes woke up at 7 on 4 hours of sleep, still in full makeup, still with the smell of hotel perfume and a faint trace of his cologne on the inside of her wrist, and she reached for her phone before her eyes were fully open and there was nothing on the screen. No missed call, no text, no email. Just the small cold face of the phone telling her it was 7:04 a.m. on Sunday, April 15th, and that exactly 27 people had liked a photograph her aunt had posted of a dog in Syracuse. She put the phone down, screen side down, on the bedspread. She told herself calmly that it was 7 a.m. and that she had asked him to call at a reasonable hour, and that a reasonable hour was not 7 a.m. She got up. She washed her face. She looked at the red dress, which Raina had hung back in the garment bag, and hooked over the bathroom door, and she felt a quick hot thing in her stomach that was not entirely pleasant, because the dress in the daylight looked like a costume, and she was, in a thin gray t-shirt with her hair in a bun, very much herself again. She made coffee. She did not check the phone. She checked the phone. Nothing. At 8, Raina came out in a robe, took one look at her face, and said, "He hasn't called yet. It's 8 in the morning." I'm not worried. Raina. I didn't say anything. You said, twice. That's a sound. That's just a sound I make. Clara drank her coffee. At 9, she did laundry. At 10, she went with Raina to the bodega on the corner for eggs and a newspaper, and she did not, either going or coming, check the phone. And when they got back up the 4 flights, she put the phone on the kitchen counter with the screen facing down, and she made breakfast, and Raina watched her not look at it. At 10:40, the phone buzzed. Clara did not move for a full second, because her body had gone tight in a way she did not want it to be seen going tight. And then she walked with deliberate normalcy to the counter, and she turned it over. It was her mother. "Clara, honey, call me when you can. No rush. Love you." Clara closed her eyes for a second. "Who?" Raina said from the couch. "My mom." "Okay. I'm going to call her." "Okay." She went into her bedroom. She closed the door. She sat on the edge of the twin bed with the faded blue comforter she had bought off Raina's cousin for $15, and she called her mother in Syracuse, and she talked to her for 22 minutes about her brother's new posting, and about her aunt's diabetes, and about the leak in her mother's kitchen ceiling, and she did not mention the landmark, and she did not mention Vincent Hale, and when her mother said, "Did you have any fun this weekend, baby?" Clara said, "I went to a thing for school," and her mother said, "Oh, good, honey, you deserve some fun." And Clara's throat closed for a moment, and she got off the phone. She sat on the bed. She looked at the screen. No Vincent. It was 11:03. At 11:30, she picked up the phone and wrote a text. "Good morning." She looked at it for 30 seconds. She deleted it. She wrote, "Hi." She looked at that. She deleted it. She put the phone down. She lay back on the bed. She stared at the ceiling. She told herself out loud into the empty room, "Clara, you asked him to call. He said he would call. He has had, at this point, 16 hours to call. Give the man until noon." She gave him until noon. Noon came. He did not call. At 12:15, Clara stood up, and she walked out of the bedroom, and she said, "Raina, I'm going to the gym." Raina, from the couch, did not look up from her magazine. She said, "Baby, you don't go to the gym." "I'm starting." "Okay. Don't wait up." "Clara, it's lunchtime." "I know what time it is, Raina." Raina looked up then. Her face softened. She did not say any of the things Clara was afraid she was going to say. She said, "Okay, honey, go. Walk it out. I'll be here." Clara walked. She did not go to the gym. She didn't have a gym. She walked down St. Nicholas and across to Broadway and down Broadway for 30 blocks, in a t-shirt and a fleece and the jeans with the hole in the knee, and she walked through the Sunday crowd on Broadway like a person trying to outpace a thought. Her phone stayed in her pocket. She did not take it out. She did not look at it. At a bench in front of a Chase Bank on 125th, She finally sat down because her calves had started to cramp. She took out the phone. No calls. No texts. It was 1:47. Clara Hayes, who had not cried since the stairwell, who had not cried on the dance floor, who had not cried in the back of the black car with her head on Vincent Hale's shoulder. Clara Hayes sat on a cold metal bench in front of a Chase Bank on 125th Street in Harlem and cried quietly for about 3 minutes into the sleeve of her fleece. Then she wiped her face and she got up and she walked back up Broadway. She told herself on the walk back that she had known. She told herself, known since the moment she said yes in the kitchen that this was how it was going to end. Men like Vincent Hale did not kiss girls like Clara Hayes in ballrooms and then show up the next morning with coffee. Men like Vincent Hale did what they did, and then they went back to the rooms they had come from, and the girls they had kissed went back to cleaning those rooms, and everyone pretended, very politely, that the night in between had not happened. She told herself she was not surprised. She was surprised. She was in the honest part of herself blindsided, because she had, at some point between the kitchen island and the Landmark Hotel, stopped believing he was that kind of man. That was the thing she could not forgive herself for, walking back up Broadway at 2:15 on a Sunday afternoon. Not that he had disappeared. He was allowed by the laws of the world she had grown up in to disappear. The unforgivable part was that she had let him convince her he wouldn't. Back at the apartment, she did not tell Raina she had been crying. Raina, who had been a roommate long enough to know when to fight and when not to, did not ask. She put a plate of rice and beans on the counter. Clara ate it standing up. Then she took a shower, a long one, and she washed her hair and she scrubbed the last of the Gala off her skin and she put on sweatpants and she sat on the couch with Raina, and they watched 3 episodes of a sitcom from the early 2000s in which nothing ever went wrong. And at 7 p.m., Clara picked up her phone one more time and there was nothing, and she turned the screen off and she put it face down on the coffee table and she said evenly, "Okay." "Okay?" Raina said. "Okay. Baby." "Raina, I don't want to talk about it. I really don't. Can we just watch the show?" Raina looked at her for a long moment. "Yeah, baby, we can just watch the show." They watched the show. Clara went to bed at 11. She did not sleep much. She did not look at the phone. In the morning it was Monday, and Monday was Mrs. Devlin and 42, and the Weissmans on 38, and Mr. Hale's penthouse on 47. She went to work. What she did not know, because he had not called, because he had not texted, because he had done nothing on a Sunday that a man was supposed to do, what Clara Hayes did not know was that Vincent Hale was not asleep in his own apartment. He was in a hotel room in Boston. He had left the Ardent at 5:40 on Sunday morning. He had not slept. He had stood at the kitchen window in his tuxedo with the tie undone until about 3, watching the city, and at 3 he had sat down on the kitchen floor, on the floor, against the island, in a tuxedo. And for the first time since his father died, he had cried, short and ugly and alone, into the heels of his hands for about 4 minutes. It had not been a decision. It had happened the way weather happens. He had not been able to stop it. After it stopped, he had sat on the floor for another hour. At 4:30, he had stood up. He had gone into the bathroom. He had washed his face in cold water. He had looked at himself in the mirror and had not recognized the person looking back. At 4:45, he had picked up his phone. He had looked at Clara's name in his contacts for a long time. He had not called her, because this, in the quiet of his own head, was what Vincent Hale had understood somewhere between the back of the car and the kitchen floor, that he had kissed that girl on a dance floor in front of 500 people, and he had meant it, and that he had not, in any meaningful way, the first idea of what to do next. He had not been in a real relationship in 11 years. The last woman who had lived in his apartment had moved out when he was 23. Every woman he had known since had been a woman like Odette, whose last name he had not learned, and the reason he had not learned her last name was not because he was a bad man, but because the women who moved through his life had agreed, at the door, that last names were not part of the arrangement. He had built that door himself. He had, over a decade, made it thicker and thicker. And last night, in a red dress in a ballroom, a 23-year-old girl from a town in upstate New York had walked up to that door, and he had opened it, and he had, for the first time in his adult life, let somebody in without the contract. He was not, he understood, sitting on his kitchen floor at 4 a.m., a man who could be trusted with that. He had spent 34 years learning, very carefully, how not to love anyone the way his father had loved him, because his father had died on a kitchen floor, and Vincent had watched, and Vincent had not, after that, been able to figure out where, in himself, to put that kind of love without it killing him too. He was not, he told himself, ready. He was not going to call her at 7 a.m. like a boy. He was not going to show up at her apartment with coffee and make her promises he could not, for certain, in the daylight, keep. He had promised, in the car, that he would not disappear. He told himself on the kitchen floor that he was not disappearing. He was thinking. He booked, on his phone, a 6:50 a.m. flight to Boston. There was a shareholders meeting on Tuesday at Hale Maritime's Northeast office. He was supposed to be there Monday afternoon. He moved it up. He told Davy at 5:04 a.m. that he was going in early. Davy, when he saw the email, wrote back copy that, boss, and did not ask any questions. Vincent threw a bag together. He changed out of the tuxedo. He left the tuxedo on the bedroom chair in a small black heap that had, on it, for a long time, a single dark red thread that had come off the hem of a dress somewhere in the turn on the dance floor, and he did not see the thread. He showered, he put on a suit. He left the penthouse at 5:40. He did not leave a note. He did not call. He did not, as it turned out, text. It was not a decision so much as a paralysis. Each hour he did not call made the next hour harder to call in. By 10 a.m. he was in a car from Logan. By 11, he was in a conference room on Federal Street. By noon, he was listening to a man named Harrison walk him through a slide deck about routing, and the words were going in and the words were going out, and Vincent could not, at any given second, have told you what the slide on the screen said, because there was, running under everything, a very loud low sentence in his head, which was, "She is going to think you abandoned her." The sentence got louder at 1. It got louder at 2. At 3, he excused himself from the conference room and went into the hallway and took out his phone and started to type. Clara. He typed 4 different openings. He deleted all 4. He stared at the screen. He put the phone back in his pocket. He went back into the conference room. By the time he finally got to the hotel, it was nearly 9 at night, and he had not eaten, and he sat on the edge of the bed in a 2-clean room on the 14th floor of a Marriott and looked at the small fake flowers on the nightstand and thought, calmly and coldly, "You are a coward, Vincent Hale, and you are hurting that girl right now, and you know it, and you still haven't called." He did not call. He told himself he would call in the morning. He did not call in the morning. By Monday morning, he had gone a full 32 hours without speaking to Clara, and the silence had become a physical object in the room with him, a piece of furniture he could not look at directly. Which is to say that at 7:45 a.m. on Monday, April 16th, when Clara Hayes walked into the Ardent Tower and clocked in at the housekeeping office in the basement, what she was walking into was a problem Vincent Hale was, at that exact moment, in a hotel room in Boston, pacing his carpet about. Maria Ortega, at her desk, looked up when Clara came in. Maria Ortega had been a supervisor for a long time. Maria Ortega took one look at Clara Hayes' face and stood up and said, "Honey, come in my office." "Mrs. Ortega, Come in my office, Clara?" Clara went in the office. Maria closed the door. She sat down on the edge of her desk, which was covered in schedules and invoices and a styrofoam cup of coffee from the deli on the corner. Clara sat in the chair across from her because Maria had pointed at the chair, and people did what Maria pointed at. "Clara!" "Yes, ma'am. I can take you off 47 today." Clara did not look up. "I don't need that, Mrs. Ortega." "I'm telling you I can." "I know. I can put Dolores up there this week. She owes me a favor. He's not even in town. It's just the bathroom and the kitchen floor. It's an hour." "He's not in town?" Maria tilted her head. "Baby," she said. "You didn't know that?" Clara's hands, in her lap, tightened around each other. "No, ma'am. He's in Boston. Left yesterday morning. I got an email from his assistant for the cleaning schedule." "Oh." "Clara." "I can do the apartment, Mrs. Ortega." "Clara." "I can." Maria looked at her for a long moment. Then she said quietly, "Honey, I was a maid for 36 years. I know what a man looks like when he walks into a kitchen, looking at a girl the way that man was looking at you 10 days ago. And I know what a girl looks like on a Monday morning when a man like that has not called her on a Sunday. I'm telling you as somebody who has loved you a little since the day you walked in here 2 years ago. Go home. Take the day. Come back tomorrow. He's not going to know. I will cover you. Clara shook her head. It took her a second to find her voice. Mrs. Ortega, if I don't go up there today, I'm never going to go up there again, and I need this job. Maria looked at her. Maria, who was 58, who had raised 3 children on this job, who had stood in kitchens very much like the one on the 47th floor for most of her adult life, understood. She nodded once. All right, she said, but you come down here at 11 when you're done. You don't go to 38 until you sit in this office and eat a sandwich. Do you understand me? Yes, ma'am. I'm going to bring you a sandwich. Yes, ma'am. Go on. Clara went. In the service elevator on the way up to 47, she looked at herself in the steel doors. She was pale. Her hair was in the same low bun she wore every weekday. She was in the black polo and the dark slacks and the practical sneakers she always wore for the long floor, and she could almost convince herself that the Saturday night had not happened, that the girl in the red dress in the marble lobby of the Landmark Hotel had been a different girl entirely. A girl who had stepped out of a costume and stepped back into Clara Hayes' body on Sunday morning when the phone did not ring. The elevator stopped. The doors opened. Clara walked out onto the 47th floor with her cart. She let herself into the penthouse with her key card. The kitchen was the way she had left it on Friday. There was a single glass upside down in the dish rack. There was a small folded receipt on the counter that had not been there on Friday. She picked it up, by habit, to move it to the paper tray in the office, and she saw on it, in small print, the Landmark Hotel. Saturday, April 14th. $62,400. And she did not let herself look at the line items, and she set the receipt down, carefully, on the counter, exactly where it had been, and she went to get the vacuum. The apartment, it turned out, was easy. He had not slept in the bed. The sheets were exactly the way she had pulled them tight on Friday. He had showered. There was a damp towel in the hamper, a thin, dark hair in the drain she pulled out with a tissue. And he had shaved because there were 3 little black hairs on the porcelain of the sink. And she wiped the sink, and she threw out the tissue, and she did not for a moment cry. In the bedroom, on the armchair by the window, the tuxedo was in a heap. She had not meant to go near it. She had meant to go around it, the way she went around the occasional pair of shoes he left out. But something about the way the tuxedo jacket was lying, one arm folded under, the lining twisted, made her stop. She walked over. She picked up the jacket. She shook it out. She laid it carefully on the bed, lining up the shoulders. She picked up the pants, folded them along the crease. She picked up the shirt, which had a small smudge of something on the collar, probably the red of her own mouth, and she held it for 1 second longer than she needed to, and she did not hold it against her face, and she put it, folded, on top of the pants. And then she saw the thread. It was on the hem of the jacket, about 2 inches long, caught in a tiny hook of a button thread. Dark red. She knew the exact shade. It was the red of the dress that was hanging at this very moment in its white garment bag on the back of Raina's closet door, because Clara had not yet been able to put it back in her own closet. She stood in the bedroom of the 47th floor penthouse of the Ardent Tower, holding a tuxedo jacket with a thread from her own dress on the hem, and she looked at the thread for a long time. Then she pulled it off, very gently, and she wound it around the tip of her finger, and she put it in the inside pocket of her uniform, next to the thin gold chain from her brother. She finished the apartment. She went down to Mrs. Ortega's office at 11, and she ate the sandwich, which was ham and cheese on a Kaiser roll with no mustard. And she did not say anything, and Mrs. Ortega did not say anything. And at 11:20, she went to 38, and she did the Weissmans, and she went home. She did not check her phone for texts during her shift, because she did not check her phone during her shifts, but on the train home she looked, and there was nothing. It was now Monday evening, 44 hours after he had kissed her on a dance floor. She did the thing she had not allowed herself to do on Sunday. She called him. The phone rang 4 times and went to voicemail. His own voice, clipped. "This is Vincent Hale. Leave a message." And her chest did a small hard thing, and she did not leave a message, and she hung up. She went home. She told Raina flatly that he was in Boston, and that he had not called, and that she had called him, and that he had not answered, and that she was going to bed. Raina, to her enormous credit, did not say anything clever. Raina said, "Okay, baby," and went into the kitchen and came back with tea, and Clara drank the tea and she went to bed. Monday night, she slept. She slept very hard. Tuesday morning at 6:42 a.m., her phone rang. Clara was in the shower. Raina was in the kitchen. The phone was on the couch where Clara had left it last night. Raina, who was on her second coffee, picked up the phone because the screen said Vincent Hale, and because Raina, who had been waiting 2.5 days for that screen to say exactly that, was not going to let it go to voicemail. "Hello?" Raina said. There was a small pause. I'm sorry, I think I have the wrong number. I was trying to reach Clara Hayes." Another pause, longer. "Yes." "She's in the shower, Mr. Hale." A breath on the other end of the line. "Is this Raina?" Raina. "Yes, sir." "Raina, my flight lands at LaGuardia at 10:45. I'm going to be at your building at noon. I would like to talk to Clara, if she'll see me." Raina, to her own credit, did not say any of the things she had been writing in her head for 48 hours. She said evenly, "Mr. Hale, that's going to be Clara's call, not mine. I understand. I'm going to tell her you called. Please do. At 6:42 on Tuesday morning." "Raina, I'm just establishing the timeline, sir. I deserve that." "You do." Raina. "Mr. Hale. Tell her I'm sorry. Tell her I'm very, very sorry. Tell her I will explain everything at noon, if she'll let me, and I will understand entirely if she will not." "I'll tell her. Thank you." He hung up. Raina put the phone down. She stood in the middle of the kitchen for a second. Then she walked to the bathroom door and she knocked, and she said, "Clara," he called. The water stopped. "What?" "He called, just now. He lands at LaGuardia at 10:45. He wants to come here at noon. He said he's sorry, a lot. He said he will explain. He said he will understand if you don't want to see him." There was a long silence from the bathroom. Then Clara said through the door, very quietly, Did he sound okay?" Raina considered. "No, baby. He sounded like a man who hasn't slept in 3 days. Okay? What do you want me to tell him?" Tell him noon is fine." "Okay." "And Raina?" "Yeah." "Can you be out?" "Done." At 11:56, the buzzer rang. Clara, sitting on the couch, did not jump. She had spent the morning doing the thing a person does when they are waiting for an hour to arrive. Folding laundry, washing dishes, not eating, not crying, not rehearsing, moving her body through the apartment in the slow, careful way a person moves when they have decided, in advance, not to be nervous. She pressed the buzzer. She waited. Footsteps on the stairs. 4 flights. He was not hurrying. A knock. She opened the door. Vincent Hale was standing in the hallway of her walk-up in Washington Heights in a dark gray overcoat and a black sweater and jeans and shoes that were not tuxedo shoes, and he looked, up close, like a man who had flown in from Boston that morning on 3 hours of sleep. There were circles under his eyes. He had shaved, but not very recently. His hair was wrong. The left side was slightly flatter than the right, the way a man's hair is when he has rubbed at it on a plane. He was holding a paper cup of coffee in one hand. He did not hold it out. He held it like a prop he had regretted buying. Clara. Vincent. May I come in? Yes. He came in. The apartment was small. He did not comment on it. He did not look around. His eyes, once he was in, found hers and stayed there. She closed the door behind him. She took the coffee from him because he was still holding it like he did not know what to do with it, and she set it down on the little kitchen table. Sit, she said. Clara. Sit, Vincent, please. He sat. She sat across from him at the table. For a moment, neither of them spoke. A siren went past outside, far away. Raina's clock on the kitchen wall ticked too loud. I want to say it first, Clara said. All right. I am angry. Yes. I am angry because you promised in the car that you would not disappear, and then you disappeared. Yes. I am angry because I spent Sunday on a bench in front of a Chase Bank on 125th Street crying into my sleeve, and I do not cry in public, Vincent, I have spent 23 years training myself not to cry in public, and you made me do that in one day. Clara, I am not done. I'm sorry. I am angry because I called you yesterday and you did not pick up. I was in a meeting. I saw your number after. I wanted to call you back, but I didn't know what to say. And by the time I thought I knew, it was 9 at night, and I thought, she will not want to call from me at 9 at night. And Vincent, yes, I want you to tell me what happened. He did not answer for a second. He put his hands flat on the kitchen table. The table was an old pine table with a burn mark from Raina's pan on one corner and a water ring on the other. His hands on it looked out of place. Expensive cuffs, a thin silver watch. And at the same time, somehow, they did not look out of place at all, because they were shaking very slightly, and a man's shaking hands looked the same on any table. Clara, he said, I don't know how to do this. What I am about to do. I do not know how to do it. I have not done it in a long time. I may do it badly. I need you to know that before I start. Okay. On Saturday night, after I dropped you off. Yes. I went back to my apartment and I stood at the window and I realized that for the first time since my father died, I had just done something I was not going to be able to undo. And I did not know what to do with that. I sat on the kitchen floor. I cried. I am telling you that because I need you to believe at the end of this that what happened was not because I did not care. I cried because I cared. I cried because I cared so much, so suddenly, that I did not know where to put it, and I have been a man for a long time who knows where to put every single thing in his life, and I did not know where to put you. Clara was very still. I booked a flight at 5 in the morning. I told myself I needed time to think. I told myself I was not disappearing. I was thinking. I told myself I would call you on Sunday morning. And then it was Sunday afternoon, and I had not called, and every hour I had not called made the next hour harder to call in. And by Sunday night, I was in a hotel room in Boston thinking you are hurting that girl right now, and you know it, and you have not called, and Vincent. Clara, why didn't you call? He looked at her. His face did a thing. Because I was scared, Clara. Of me. Of failing you. She did not say anything. I am, he said slowly, very good at some things and very bad at others. And the things I am bad at, I have been very careful for a long time not to attempt. And I looked at you on Sunday morning across a river, and I thought I'm going to fail her. I thought what happens when the dress is back in the closet and the ballroom is over and I have to show up. Actually show up. Not for one night in a tuxedo, but on a Wednesday and a Thursday and a February. I thought about what it would do to you if I told you I could do that. And then it turned out I couldn't. And I panicked, Clara. I did not know it was panic at the time. At the time, I thought I was being responsible. At the time, I thought I don't know what I thought I was being. I thought if I got on a plane and thought about it, I would come back with a better answer. I did not come back with a better answer. I came back with the same answer I went with, which is that I have never been more afraid of anything in my life than I am of failing you. And I did the exact thing I was afraid of. I failed you. By Sunday night, I had already failed you. I knew it, and I still didn't call. Oh. Clara was quiet. Her eyes, he was surprised to see, were dry. She said, Vincent? Yes. Look at me. He looked at her. I'm not going to be your rescue, she said. Clara. No. Listen, I am not going to be the girl you saved from the stairwell. I am not going to be the girl in the red dress. I am not going to be the reason you figure out how to feel things again. I am not going to be a project. I spent my entire life not being anybody's daughter, not being anybody's wife, not being Madison Calloway's friend, and I am not about to start being Vincent Hale's redemption. If you're going to be in my life, you're going to be in my life as a man, not as a man who is trying to fix something. Do you understand what I am saying? Yes. Say it back. I'm not going to be in your life as a man who is trying to fix something. Okay? Okay. And you are going to fail, Vincent. You are going to fail me again. Not on purpose. Just just because you are a person, and people fail each other. And when you do, you are going to call me. You are not going to get on a plane. You are not going to sit on a kitchen floor. You're going to pick up the phone, even if what you have to say is that you do not know what to say. Are we clear? Yes? And Vincent? Yes? I am not doing this with you if you're going to keep pretending you are a dangerous man. He looked up. Clara, you're not a dangerous man. You're a lonely one. I know the difference. I cleaned your bathroom for 2 years. There was no one in your bed, Vincent. I know. I changed the sheets. A dangerous man has people in and out of his apartment. You do not. You have not had a real person in your apartment in I don't know how long. You are a lonely, tired, frightened man who has spent his whole life pretending he is made of something harder than he is. I am telling you right now that you do not have to do that with me. I already saw you cry in a stairwell, Vincent. Sort of. I already saw the thing you are hiding. The thing you are hiding is the thing I like best about you. Can you let me in on it or not? He did not speak for a long time. His hand, across the table, moved very slowly toward hers. He did not grab her hand. He laid his palm open on the pine, halfway across, and he waited, and he looked at her, and he said softly, "Yes." She looked at his hand. She looked at his face. She put her hand in his. He closed his fingers carefully around hers. His thumb moved once, very slightly, across the back of her knuckles. It was not a grand thing. It was a plain, small, very real thing, and that was, in the end, what broke her. Not the landmark, not the ballroom, not the red dress, but a 34-year-old man in a walk-up kitchen in Washington Heights holding her hand on a pine table and not saying anything pretty about it. She did not let go. Clara. Yes. Can I come back tomorrow? What for? I don't know. Nothing. Dinner, maybe, something small. I would like to come back tomorrow for something small. Yes. Yes? Yes, Vincent? Okay. Okay. He did not try to kiss her. He did not try to pull her across the table. He sat with his hand in hers and he looked at her for another minute, and then he said, "Thank you for letting me come here." "Don't thank me for that. I'm thanking you anyway." "Vincent." "Yes." "Go home. Sleep. You look terrible." He laughed. It was a short, tired laugh. He squeezed her hand once, lightly, and he stood up and he picked up the paper cup of coffee that neither of them had drunk, and he looked at it, and he set it back down carefully on the table. "Tomorrow," he said. "Tomorrow." He went to the door. At the door he stopped and he turned around, and she thought, for a second, he was going to say something large. He didn't. He said, "I'm glad you yelled at me." "I didn't yell." "You did. A little." "Okay. A little. It was good for me." "Go home, Vincent." He smiled. The small, real smile. The one that took years off his face. And he went. Clara stood in the kitchen for a long time after the door closed. She did not cry. She did not laugh. She picked up the paper cup of coffee. It was, she discovered, still slightly warm. A flat white, 2 sugars. The order she had made once in his kitchen 2 weeks ago. And she held it in both hands, and she looked out the window at the gray afternoon over Washington Heights, and she thought calmly that she had, for the first time in her life, been loved not by someone who wanted her small, but by someone who had been willing, in a kitchen on a Tuesday, to be the one who got made small, so that she could stay the size she had grown into on Saturday night in a ballroom in a red dress. She thought she could work with that. She drank the coffee, slowly, and she watched the clouds move over the buildings, and somewhere across the river, on the 47th floor of a tower, he did not for once feel trapped in, Vincent Hale let himself into his penthouse at 2 in the afternoon and took off his shoes and went into his bedroom and lay down on top of the comforter in his clothes, and for the first time in 78 hours he slept. And he did not dream of his father, and he did not dream of boardrooms, and he did not, as far as he could remember when he woke up 3 hours later, dream at all. He came back on Wednesday at 6, and he came back on Thursday at 7, and by the second Friday, Raina started leaving the apartment at 5:30 with a bag over her shoulder and a smirk over her shoulder, and Clara stopped pretending she did not know why. It was not, in the beginning, a romance the way Clara had ever imagined a romance. There was no weekend at a house upstate. There was no trip to Paris. There was, instead, a 34-year-old man at her kitchen table in a black sweater, cutting an onion with too much concentration because he did not, it turned out, actually know how to cut an onion. And there was Clara on the counter behind him in sweatpants and a tank top, eating a carrot, watching him and trying not to laugh. "You don't have to do that like it's brain surgery," she said. "Clara, the last time I cooked anything for myself that wasn't a sandwich, I was 22. "It's an onion, Vincent." "Clara, it is an onion. This is a deeply personal vegetable. I'm doing my best." "You have people who cook for you." "Yes." "You have a person whose entire job is to buy your groceries." "Yes." "And you're standing in my kitchen cutting an onion so badly, I'm going to have to redo it before you put it in anything." He turned around, knife down, and looked at her. He had a small streak of red sauce on the sleeve of the black sweater from something he had done 20 minutes earlier that neither of them had addressed. "Clara." "Vincent." "Are you making fun of me?" "A little." "That's fine. It's good for you." "It is good for me." She hopped off the counter. She took the knife. She did the onion in about a quarter of the time it was taking him, and she did it without looking, the way women who have cooked in small kitchens for small paychecks do everything. And he stood 2 feet away from her with his hands in his pockets and watched her hands, and he said quietly, "You have been feeding yourself for a long time. Since I was 12. 12. My mother worked nights." "Clara, don't do that." "Do what?" "Don't look at me like that when I tell you things, like you want to buy me a house." "I was not looking at you like I wanted to buy you a house." "You were. You do. You look at me like that every time I tell you a normal story about my normal life." A 12-year-old making spaghetti is not a tragedy, Vincent. It's just America. He was quiet for a second. "Okay. Okay? Okay, I'll work on the face." "Thank you." "Clara." "Yes, I have." "The face is because I did not know for a long time that people made dinner for themselves at 12. And I am sitting with that. I will sit with it quietly. You don't have to see the face." She paused, the knife still in her hand. She looked at him. She said softly, "You're allowed to have the face, Vincent. I just don't want you to have it at me." "Okay? Okay." She went back to the onion. He went back to the stove. They did not, for the rest of the cooking, talk very much, but it was a quiet that had turned over 4 weeks, from the scared quiet of the stairwell into a different quiet. The quiet of 2 people moving around a 12 by 10 kitchen without bumping into each other, which is the specific quiet a body learns only by being allowed near another body, often without being in the way. That was the first thing Clara noticed in those first weeks. The bodies of them learned each other before the lives did. His hand on the small of her back at a restaurant, the weight of it not possessive but placing. The way a hand announces to a room, "This is who I am with." Her foot on the couch, tucked under his thigh while he read something on his phone, and she read a paperback she was pretending she had already read. The way he put his coffee mug down, always, on a coaster, because she had once, half joking, called him into the kitchen and shown him a water ring on her grandmother's side table and said, "Without heat, I live here, Vincent," and he had not, after that, put down a single uncoastered mug for a month. It was like that. It was not, from the outside, dramatic. From the inside, it was the most dramatic thing either of them had ever done. Because under the onions and the coasters and the couch, under all of it, all the small adjustments of 2 people learning the ergonomics of each other, they were, both of them, rebuilding how they lived in the world, and they were doing it on purpose. Vincent rearranged his calendar first. He did it without making a speech about it. He just, one Wednesday in May, walked into Davy's office at 8 a.m. and said, "Davy, no more evening meetings past 7, unless it's a close." And Davy, who was a professional, did not look up and did not smile and said, "Copy that, boss," and moved the 4 standing 7:30 dinners off the calendar by 10 a.m. He made Fridays half-days for himself, which he had not done since he took over the company, and on the Friday afternoons he went uptown, sometimes in a car, and sometimes once, on the subway, because Clara had laughed at him for saying he did not know the one train went all the way to Washington Heights. He stood on the platform at 72nd in a suit on a Friday in late May, holding a bouquet of grocery store tulips because she had told him she thought grocery store tulips were underrated, and he looked, to his own reflection in the tunnel darkness across the tracks. Like a man he had not seen in his own face in a decade. He looked in the reflection a little like his father before his father died. He did not mind it. Clara, for her part, did something harder. She did not move. She did not let him move her. In May, on a Sunday morning over breakfast in her apartment, he said very carefully, "Clara, I have been thinking. The walk-up is fine, of course, but in terms of where I can visit without the building noticing, I could set you up with an apartment somewhere midtown. Not anything showy, just..." She put her coffee down. "Vincent." "Yes." "No." "Clara, I'm going to let you finish, but I'm telling you now, the answer is no. And I'm telling you now, so you stop before you have to hear yourself say the rest of the sentence." He looked at her. He smiled, small and tired. "Okay. Okay? Okay. I hear myself. I pay my rent, Vincent. I have paid my rent on time for 3 years. You're not going to pay my rent. Not next month, not next year, not ever. If this..." She gestured between them, a small, careful motion. "If this becomes a thing where we live together, someday, a long time from now, maybe, I will split it with you, down the middle, even if the middle of your half is $100,000 a month, more than the middle of mine. But you're not going to set me up in an apartment, because the day you set me up in an apartment is the day I start being a girl you set up in an apartment, and I am not going to be that. Bosria sushi ma rain. Okay? I mean it. I know you mean it. I am saying okay. Okay. For the record, yes. It was a bad idea. It was a very bad idea, Vincent. It was one of your worst." He laughed. She did not move. She finished her coffee. What she did let him do was what she had started to let him do the moment she accepted the ride to the landmark. She let him show up. She let him pick her up on Saturdays. She let him bring takeout from restaurants she would not, in 3 lifetimes, have paid for herself. She let him meet her mother on a Saturday in June, when her mother came down from Syracuse on the bus, and they sat in a diner in Midtown for 3 hours. And her mother, at the end of it, in the bathroom, took Clara's hand and said, "Honey, I don't understand 90% of what that man does for a living, but he looked at you like you hung the moon, and if he ever stops looking at you like that, you call me and I'll come down on the bus and we'll handle it." And Clara had held her mother's hand over the sink and had not cried, and had cried a little later in the car, with Vincent's hand on the back of her neck and his eyes very carefully on the road. There were bad weeks. There was the week in late May when Vincent went radio silent for 2 days because his mother, in Darien, had called him and told him that a cousin of his had died, and he did not know how to tell Clara, because he did not know how to tell Clara that there were people in his life who had died, because he was still learning, in his mid-30s, that the right answer when someone died was to tell the person you loved about it, instead of flying to Connecticut and coming back a week later with a tighter jaw. Clara had found out on Monday from Maria Ortega, who had heard it from a doorman, who had heard it from a driver, and Clara had gone home at 6 p.m. and had called him, and had not yelled, and had said very quietly, "Vincent, we talked about this. You have to pick up the phone." And he had said, "I know." And she had said, "I'm coming over." And he had said, "Clara, it's 9. You worked all day?" And she had said, "I'm coming over, Vincent." And she had gotten on the train in her work uniform and ridden down to the Ardent. And Maria Ortega at the desk had looked up when Clara came through the lobby in the polo and the slacks. And Maria Ortega had nodded once and had turned back to her paperwork, because Maria Ortega, at 58, had understood something about the whole arrangement that had taken the building about 45 minutes to get used to, which was that Clara Hayes was now, in addition to being a maid on Monday, Wednesday, Friday, the woman Mr. Hale was seeing, and that the two facts did not, as the building had first assumed they would, need to cancel each other out. Upstairs, Clara had not knocked on the service door. She had knocked on the front door because she was not on the clock. Vincent had opened it in a white t-shirt and jeans, and his eyes were red, and his hair was bad, and she had walked past him into the apartment she had spent 2 years cleaning without speaking to him, and she had sat down on his enormous leather couch, and she had patted the cushion next to her, and she had said, "Come here." He had come there. He had put his head in her lap. He had cried, not much, but some, and it had been, for him, a new thing, the second new crying in a month, and she had put her hand in his hair and she had said, "Vincent, you're going to have to learn that the world does not stop being hard just because I am in it. You are still going to lose people. You are still going to have bad weeks. You can tell me. You can tell me on a Tuesday. You do not have to dress it up for me. Do you understand?" "Yes." "Say it back. I don't have to dress it up for you." "Good." That had been the bad week. There were other bad weeks, too. There was the week Madison Calloway, who had been very quiet in the professional world since April, applied for a job at a consulting firm in Midtown, and found out on the final round from a sympathetic recruiter who thought she was doing her a favor that the firm had, on a phone call from someone at Hale Maritime, been told that Madison Calloway had treated an employee of theirs unkindly, and that the firm could take that however it liked. Madison Calloway, whose father had warned her that there would be consequences and who had not, until she was rejected, believed him, had cried in the bathroom of the consulting firm for 45 minutes, and had then gotten in a cab and gone home, and had called Clara's phone from a number Clara did not know, and left a voicemail that Clara had listened to twice, and then, after thinking about it for a long time, deleted. Clara did not tell Vincent about the voicemail for 3 days. When she did, they were in his apartment. She was coming over more now, about 2 nights a week, though she still did not sleep there on a night before a morning when she worked there, because she had, for her own reasons, refused to blur that particular line. And he was on the couch with papers on his lap, and she had said evenly, "Vincent, yes, I need to tell you something, and I need you to not do a thing." He looked at her over the papers. "Okay." Madison Calloway called me on Tuesday. She was crying. She found out that a consulting firm she was interviewing at turned her down because somebody at your company called them about her. I need you to tell me if that was you." He did not answer right away. He set the papers down on the coffee table. "Clara, was it you?" "Yes." "Okay." "Clara, Vincent." "Yes." "Don't do that again." "Clara, don't do it again. Not for me. Not about Madison, not about Eleanor Whitford, not about anybody I went to school with. I didn't ask you to. I specifically, the night of the gala, did not ask you to. I looked her in the eye at her own family's table, and I told her it was just girls being girls, and I meant it. Not because I forgave her. I haven't, entirely. But because I decided a long time ago that I was not going to be a woman whose life was spent keeping a running tab on who had wronged her. I don't have the energy for that, Vincent, and I don't want you to spend your energy on it for me." He was quiet for a long time. "Okay. I mean it. I hear you. You're going to have to stop thinking of your power as a thing you use for me. Do you understand the difference between for me and instead of me?" "I think I do. I don't want you to protect me from my own life, Vincent. I want you to live in it with me. If someone wrongs me, I will deal with it, or I will decide it is not worth dealing with, which is almost always the answer. Either way, it is mine. It is not a thing you need to fix in the background. Am I making sense?" "Yes." "Okay." "Clara." "Yes." "For what it's worth. I'm sorry. It's worth something. Okay? Come here, Char." He came there. He slid down the couch, and he put his arm around her, and she leaned into him, and they sat like that, not talking, for a long time. Somewhere in the building, a pipe ticked. Outside, the city did what the city did. "Vincent." "Yes." "Madison is going to get a job. She is going to be fine. Her father has a Rolodex. She is going to be fine." "Yes." "And the next time you want to stop somebody's job interview, you're going to call me first." "Yes." "Good." By the middle of June, something began to shift, and it shifted as most real shifts do, not in a big moment, but in a small one. They were at her apartment on a Wednesday night. Raina was, again, strategically not home. Clara was on the couch with her laptop open, working on a spreadsheet for a small logistics company in Queens that had about 3 weeks earlier hired her as an analyst for $58,000 a year plus benefits, a job she had found herself on a job board and had interviewed for 4 times and had been offered and had accepted, and had told Vincent about over dinner as a small flat fact between 2 bites of pad thai, watching his face to see if he would try to touch it. And he had not, because he had learned not to. Benefits? he had said. Yes. Dental? Yes, Vincent. Good. That was all he had said. On the Wednesday in June, she was working on the spreadsheet, and Vincent was on the floor with his back against the couch, in jeans and an old Henley, reading a magazine he had stolen off her coffee table, and he said without looking up, Clara, the lease on your place. Yes. When is it up? August 1st. I thought so. She did not look up from the spreadsheet. Vincent. Yes. Don't. I'm not doing anything. You're thinking about something. I'm thinking about something, but I'm not doing it. I'm asking permission to think about it out loud. She closed the laptop. She set it on the coffee table. She turned one knee up on the couch so that she was looking down at him. Vincent Hale. Clara Hayes? You want to ask me to move in with you? Yes? At the Ardent? No. No? No. At a new place, somewhere else. I have been looking a little in my spare time. I am not going to show you anything. I am not going to put a deposit on anything. I am telling you that I have been thinking about it, and that if you wanted, we could look at a few places together and see if anything made sense, and that we could, on the lease, both of our names, and that I would like that, more than I have liked anything in a long time. Why a new place? He set the magazine down. He looked up at her. Because, he said, I have lived in the Ardent for 4 years, and I have not been happy there once. And because I met you in that building, and I do not want our first home to be the room I cleaned my father out of. She did not answer right away. She looked at his face. She thought about the photograph on the credenza. The teenage boy in the dark suit with the man's hand on his shoulder. She said, You cleaned your father out of the Ardent. Some of his things? Yes. When I moved in, he had an apartment in the city he kept for work. I didn't want to live in it. So I sold it, and I kept a few boxes. And I moved into the Ardent because a real estate agent told me I should. That was the whole reason. I took an apartment I didn't want on a floor I didn't want because a woman with a clipboard told me it would impress a board I was not yet on. Vincent? Yes. I would like to look at some places with you. He closed his eyes for a second. When he opened them, they were very bright. Okay, he said, on one condition. Anything. Don't say anything. It makes my lawyer brain nervous. Clara, the condition is that we pick it together. I'm not walking into 3 penthouses, Vincent. If we are going to look at places, we are looking at places where people actually live. 2 bedrooms, a kitchen, a neighborhood where I can walk to get a gallon of milk. I don't want a building with a doorman who calls me ma'am. I don't want a view. I want a window that opens. A window that opens. A window that opens. He laughed. He leaned forward. He put his head briefly against her knee. Okay, he said into her jeans, a window that opens. Okay. In July, they found one. It was a 2-bedroom on the top floor of a 5-story building on a side street in the West Village, with a kitchen too small for 2 people and a living room that got sun from the south, and a narrow iron fire escape outside the bedroom window that had, on it, in a flaking chalk that someone had written a very long time ago, the word hello. The realtor apologized for the chalk. Clara said, leave it. Vincent said, leave it, at the exact same moment, and the realtor looked between them and smiled the tight professional smile of a woman who had already written her commission check in her head. They signed the lease on a Tuesday, both names. Clara moved in on August 3rd. Vincent moved in on August 4th, because he was not, structurally, a man who could move in a single day, and because he had to move out of the Ardent, to schedule 3 movers and a donation pickup, and a man to come take the piano he had not played in 9 years. Clara watched, from the couch of the new apartment on August 4th, as Vincent carried a single cardboard box up the 5 flights himself, because the movers had already gone home. He set the box on the floor. It contained, she would learn later, 7 framed photographs, and a watch that had been his father's, and a baseball from 1961 that a neighbor had given him when he was 8. That was all he had wanted to carry up himself. He sat down on the floor next to the box. She slid off the couch onto the floor across from him. They sat, cross-legged, on the bare hardwood of an apartment they had not yet furnished, in the West Village of New York City, on a Wednesday evening in early August, and through the window that opened a fire escape breeze came in carrying someone's basil plant and someone else's music, and Vincent Hale said, "Clara?" "Yes." "I didn't think I was going to get this." "Get what?" "Any of it." She reached across the cardboard box. She took his hand. She said, "Neither did I." By the fall, the rest of the world had, in the way the world does, moved on without asking permission. Clara was at her job in Queens. She liked it, in the complicated way adults like jobs. It had good weeks and bad weeks. It had a manager named Dev who had 2 small children and a dry sense of humor. It had a desk by a window through which she could, at lunch, watch the 7 train go by on its elevated tracks. She did not, to Vincent's quiet disappointment, quit her shifts at the Ardent. She cut them to 1 day a week. Friday, Mrs. Devlin only. Because Mrs. Devlin was 82 now and getting slower and slower, and Clara was not willing to leave her to a new girl who would not know about the towels in thirds and the crystal dish at the exact angle. Vincent, who had been prepared to argue against her continued employment as a maid in the building where he owned the penthouse, took one look at her face when she explained about Mrs. Devlin and did not argue. He said, "Okay." And that was all he said, because he had, by then, learned that the correct answer to almost every sentence that came out of Clara's mouth about her own life was okay. Madison Calloway, to her own quiet credit, got a job at a different consulting firm in October, a smaller one, in a smaller building. And she turned out, once she had been made to eat a small portion of her own life, to be not a particularly bad person, a thing which is true of many people who have been given the chance to be cruel by circumstances of birth and have accepted the offer without question. She emailed Clara once, in November, a short professional email, congratulating her on the new job. Clara wrote back a short professional email. They did not become friends. They were, for the rest of their lives, one of those sets of women who would pass each other at industry events and say, "Hi, it's nice to see you," and both mean it in the way you mean it about somebody who once changed your life by being awful to you. And who then, because the universe is almost never as neat as the stories we tell about it, faded out of your life before you ever got to work out whether you had forgiven them. Clara's mother came down from Syracuse for Christmas. She slept on a blow-up mattress in the spare bedroom of the West Village apartment, because the spare bedroom had become Vincent's office and did not yet have a guest bed, and she woke up at 6 in the morning, as she always had, and made eggs, and Vincent, who had woken up at 6:30, sat at the small kitchen table in flannel pants and a sweatshirt, and he and Clara's mother, Denise Hayes, talked for an hour about Clara's brother's deployment and the cost of heating a house in upstate New York, and a recipe Denise's mother had made with apples, and Clara, coming out of the bedroom in her pajamas at 7:15, stopped in the hallway and watched them through the doorway, and did not for a moment go in, because she did not want them to know she was watching. She stood in the hallway in her pajamas, and she thought, "My mother is sitting at a table with my boyfriend." She tried the word boyfriend in her head, the way a person tries a coat, and found that it did not, any more, feel like a coat that had been cut for a different girl. She went in. She made coffee. She sat down next to Vincent. She put her hand on the back of his neck absently, the way a woman does when she has been doing it for months, and his hand came up and covered hers, and her mother across the table looked at Clara over the rim of her coffee cup with a look so proud Clara had to look down into her own cup for a second so her mother wouldn't see her face. By January, the apartment had furniture. By February, the apartment had a cat, which neither of them had planned for, but which had appeared on the fire escape on a cold night and had, over the course of 3 nights of Vincent pretending not to feed it and Clara pretending not to notice he was feeding it, moved inside. They named her Mrs. Devlin because Clara thought it was funny, and because, coincidentally, at about the time the cat moved in, the real Mrs. Devlin was in the hospital with pneumonia, and Clara had been, that week, very worried about her. By March, they had, on a Sunday morning, had their first real fight, which was about nothing. About a receipt. About a car service, about a bill that had gotten paid twice, and which had gone, in the particular escalating way these things go, into other rooms and about other things, and Clara had at some point thrown a dish towel, and Vincent had at some point walked into the bedroom and closed the door, and they had, each of them, spent 15 minutes alone in separate rooms, and then he had opened the door and he had said, "Clara, come here." I want to try that again. And she had come there, and they had tried it again, and they had figured out that the fight was not about a receipt or a car service or a bill, and that the fight was about her finding a pair of reading glasses on his nightstand that he had never told her he needed, which had made her realize in a flash that he was going to get older, that he was going to get tired, that he was going to, someday, be a man in a chair who could not see. And she had been, she told him, suddenly and horribly afraid that she was going to lose him the way he had lost his father, and that she was not going to survive it. And she had reacted to this by being angry about a receipt, because she had not, it turned out, entirely figured out yet how to say a large true thing in a small true way. Vincent had listened to all of this. He had taken his reading glasses off the nightstand. He had put them in her hands. He had said, "Clara, you are allowed to be afraid of losing me. I am afraid of losing me too. We are going to do the best we can. That is the only answer I have. That is the only answer anybody has. I am sorry it is not a better one." She had, holding the reading glasses, nodded. That was in some way neither of them said out loud at the time. The night the relationship stopped being the relationship and became the thing a relationship becomes when it has survived its first real fight, which is something else entirely, a thing that does not have a good name in English. In May, a year after the landmark, Vincent took Clara out to dinner at a small Italian restaurant on Sullivan Street. Nothing fancy. A red and white check tablecloth, a candle in a Chianti bottle, a menu that had not changed since 1987. He did not bring a ring. There was no ring. They had talked a little about rings, the way people talk about rings when they have been together a year and are not. Yet sure they want to be the kind of people who get married in the first year. And they had agreed, without quite agreeing, that they were not going to be those people. Over dinner, he said, "Clara, yes, I want to tell you something." "Okay, I am 35 years old. A year ago, if you had asked me, I would have told you that I was going to live the rest of my life in a penthouse, in a building I didn't like, and run a company I had inherited and die at a reasonable age of a medical event I had been told was coming for 20 years. I would have told you that on a Tuesday, with a straight face. I am telling you now that if you had asked me last May, the day before I met you, if I was happy, I would not have understood the question. Vincent, I'm almost done. Okay? I don't know what I'm going to do with the rest of my life. I am trying to figure out what the company should look like. I am trying to figure out how much of it I want to keep running. I am trying to figure out what my father built it for in the end, because I don't think he built it just so I could sit in a chair. I am trying to figure out, very slowly, how to be a person who owns a company and is not owned by it. And I don't know if I'm going to figure it out. But I'm telling you, across this table, that whatever I figure out, I am figuring out with you. That is the part I am sure about. I am not proposing anything. I am not asking anything. I am telling you. It is not a question. Clara looked at him. She picked up her water glass. She put it down. She picked it up again. She took a sip. She put it down. Vincent Hale. Clara Hayes. That is the least romantic way to tell your girlfriend you are probably going to spend the rest of your life with her that I have ever heard. I know. I liked it. Okay. Don't get me a ring. Not planning to. Not yet. Not yet. Okay. Okay. They walked home that night down Sullivan and across Houston, and the city was doing the spring thing it does, warm from the sidewalks and cool from the river, and a boy on a skateboard almost hit Vincent and said, "Sorry, bro." And Vincent said, "It's fine." And Clara laughed because he had said, "It's fine," in the exact Vincent Hale voice he used to terrify an entire conference room of men in suits. And she tucked her hand through his arm and leaned into him for a second and said, "Nobody calls you bro. Nobody has ever called me bro in my life. Welcome to the West Village." "Thank you, Clara." At the corner of Bleecker, a man with a dog was arguing with a woman with a stroller about whose turn it was to cross. A cab honked. Someone upstairs, somewhere above them, was practicing a violin, badly, Clara thought, walking next to him, not for the first time, but maybe for the clearest time, that what had happened in the end was not that a billionaire had rescued a maid. That was the story from the outside. That was the Madison Calloway version. That was what Eleanor Whitford would have told at her foundation dinners for the next 10 years in a slightly mean voice with her wine glass at the tilt. From the inside, it was different. From the inside, what had happened was that two lonely people had found each other in a stairwell at midnight in a building where they had been walking past each other for 2 years, and they had, by an act of courage which was much smaller than the stories made it look, and much larger than they had any right to, decided to speak to each other. That was all. That was the entire hinge of it. A man had opened a door he usually walked past, and a woman had let herself be seen when every one of her instincts had been to disappear. And from those two small decisions, everything else had followed. The dress, the ballroom, the kiss, the silence, the Boston hotel, the Tuesday afternoon at the Pine Table in Washington Heights, the onion, the cat, the fire escape with the chalk. People look at a story like that and they think it is about money. It is not about money, Clara thought, on the corner of Bleecker and Sullivan with a man's arm in hers. A story like that is about the moment a person decides they are done being invisible, and the moment another person decides they are done being alone, and the extremely dangerous luck of the two moments happening, in the same stairwell, on the same Tuesday, to two people who are willing. It is about being willing. That was the part she would tell her daughter someday, years from now, on a Saturday morning in a kitchen in a building they had not yet bought, when her daughter was 13 and had come home from school with a bad story about a girl named something that was not Madison but was the same kind of name. She would tell her daughter that the only thing, in the end, that had saved her life was that she had been willing. Willing to be seen, willing to be helped, willing to yell at a billionaire in a walk-up kitchen, willing to say no to the apartment in Midtown, willing to say, "Come here across a couch," when a man who had spent his whole life pretending he was made of stone was, in fact, crying. Being willing, she would tell her daughter, was not a soft thing. It was the hardest thing. It cost her, for a week in April, every single piece of her pride. It was worth it. It was worth every piece. On the corner of Bleecker and Sullivan, Vincent looked down at her. "What are you thinking?" "Nothing." "Liar." "I'm thinking I love you." He stopped walking for a second. She had said it before, of course, many times by then, but never, for whatever reason, on a street corner. And never, for whatever reason, like that, flat, plain, in the middle of a sentence, as if it were the kind of thing a person could just put down on a sidewalk without making a ceremony out of it. "Clara." "Vincent." "I love you too." "I know." "Okay." They crossed the street. They went home. Up the 5 flights, past the chalk. Through the door, the cat was on the couch. The window was open. The city did the city thing outside forever without them. And in that apartment, on that night, a man who had been untouchable turned off the light over the kitchen sink, and a woman who had been invisible closed the book she had been pretending to read, and they went to bed in a room with a window that opened, and in the morning they got up, and they went to work, and they came home, and they did it again, and they did it again, and they did it again. And that, in the end, was the whole ending. Not a wedding, not a proposal, not a headline, not a photograph in a magazine. Just two people who had, on a cold concrete step at midnight, decided to be willing, and who had kept on being willing for the rest of their lives, one Tuesday at a time.